Chapter 179. After Yang Zhao left, Wang Chong was still in a daze. How unexpected! Wang Chong shook his head as he muttered to himself. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. This was the arrogant imperial uncle from his previous life, the one who would shake his head and say, "Gongzi is a talented man with a bright future ahead of you." In reality, his words were insincere and insincere. As for Wang Chong, they became sworn brothers when Wang Chong was still in a humble position. This was something that had never happened in his previous life, and it left Wang Chong with an indescribable feeling. However, there was one thing that Wang Chong was certain of. Yang Zhao's existence was crucial to him changing the fate of the empire and dealing with the hidden crocodile in the royal court. Becoming sworn brothers with Wang Chong was beneficial to him. I wonder what he gave me? Wang Chong suddenly recalled the gift that Yang Zhao spoke of. Before Yang Zhao left, he had said that he could only open it after Wang Chong left. Now that Yang Zhao had left, he should be able to open it now. Wang Chong opened the purplish-red wooden box. There were no treasures, pills, cultivation techniques, or anything shocking inside. There were only a few thin pieces of letter paper, folded and stacked inside. What is this? Wang Chong frowned in bewilderment. Wang Chong took out the topmost piece of paper from the wooden box. Opening it, he saw rows of small characters. Wang Chong's doubts grew. Since ancient times, when people became sworn brothers, there were those who gave gold, those who gave treasures, and those who gave nothing at all. The only one who didn't give a letter was a letter. Opening the letter, Wang Chong's heart sank when he saw the seal at the end. He finally knew what Yang Zhao had given him. Wang Chong's heart pounded. He finally understood what was going on. The letters in the exquisite purplish-red wooden box were all letters written by Prince Qi to consort Taizhen. The content of the letter was also very simple. It was all about King Qi encouraging consort Taizhen to join forces with him to deal with the King of Song. Wang Chong counted 5 to 6 letters in total, and the content was almost the same. They were all encouraging consort Taizhen to join forces with him. It was clear that King Qi had launched a massive offensive on consort Taizhen's side. However, in the end, consort Taizhen still chose the King of Song. Otherwise, he wouldn't have received the notification from the Stone of Destiny while he was in prison. Yang Zhao, you're doing a favor for consort Taizhen, and you're also doing me a favor. Wang Chong understood what Yang Zhao meant. If he were to give these letters to the King of Song, it would be a meritorious deed. At the very least, the King of Song would owe the Wang clan a favor. After carefully placing the letters back into the wooden box, Wang Chong put them back into the drawer of his study. After settling the matters at home, Wang Chong didn't alarm anyone and headed to the Ghost Tree District in the west of the city alone. The Ghost Tree District was quiet and serene. Under the massive ghost tree, Wang Chong saw a thin figure dressed in black sitting cross-legged, waiting silently. "Elder." Wang Chong walked over and bowed. "You're back," So Young-sun said calmly. His thin face was still expressionless, but Wang Chong could still sense a sense of concern. "Yes." Wang Chong nodded. "Suffering is the tempering of life. Entering the imperial prison once isn't a big deal. Young man, it'll be beneficial for you in the future if you go through some tempering." So Young-sun said calmly. "Yes, this junior has learned his lesson." Even though Wang Chong was usually a cheeky person in front of Su Zhengchen, at this moment, he adopted a humble and respectful attitude, accepting the other party's teachings humbly. Wang Chong knew of So Young-sun's experiences, so he knew that So Young-sun had the right to say such words to him. Compared to his life experiences and the hardships he had gone through, entering the imperial prison was indeed nothing. "It's good that you can understand this. Sit down and play around with me." So Young-sun finally reached out a hand and pointed to the seat opposite him, gesturing for Wang Chong to sit down. "Yes, elder." Wang Chong heaved a sigh of relief and knelt down opposite So Young-sun. An old man and a young man, each holding a black and white chessboard, started fighting again. So Young-sun looked calm and spoke little, no different from before. On the other hand, Wang Chong felt a little uneasy when he thought of what So Young-sun had said. He almost lost a few chess pieces to So Young-sun. "Focus your mind and calm your chi." Nothing is outside your mind. Fame and fortune, all the love and humiliation are just outside your body. Even if they are outside your body, what could possibly affect your mind? So Young-sun lowered his head and said calmly. Wang Chong was startled. He had a feeling that So Young-sun was using his release from prison to teach him something. This had never happened before. This gave Wang Chong a strange feeling, but Wang Chong did not reject it. Yes, this junior understands. Wang Chong took a deep breath. As he recalled the experiences of his last life, he quickly calmed down. Although each person walked a different path, when it came to fame and fortune, the two shared the same view. So Young-sun was willing to hand over his authority when he was at the height of his power. It was clear that he had no attachment to the authority that everyone yearned for. As for Wang Chong had always been well aware that authority was only a means for him to realize his mission, not the ultimate goal. With this thought, Wang Chong grinned and quickly calmed down. On the chessboard, he once again defeated the war god So Young-sun. So Young-sun's eyes flashed with praise. He spread out the chess pieces and once more began to play against Wang Chong. Round after round, match after match, Su Jingchen had never won a single one of them. There was no day or night on the chessboard, and it was impossible to sense the passage of time. It had been a long time since the two had fought, and even So Young-sun had lost track of time. Before they knew it, night had fallen. On this day, Wang Chong and So Young-sun played later than any other day. He's here, I found him. While the two were playing, a commotion suddenly came from behind them. Wang Chong paled, and before he could react, he heard a familiar voice at his ear. Ah, young Master Wang, you've truly been looking for me. Today is the day you were released from prison. His Highness wanted to hold a welcoming dinner for you, but I didn't expect to find you. Not even the Wang clan. So you were hiding here. In the darkness, a figure in a wide-sleeved robe walked over. Lu Ting. In the darkness of the night, as the distance closed, the person's face immediately became clear. It was the King of Song's aide, Lu Ting. Few people came to the Ghost Tree District, and Wang Chong had never brought anyone here before. Wang Chong didn't know why Lu Ting was here, nor did he know why he was here. If it was in the past, Wang Chong would definitely be overjoyed to see Lu Ting here, and he would even be willing to drink and chat with him. But now was definitely not the time. Ha, no wonder I couldn't find you. So you were playing chess with someone here, playing chess? A moment ago, Lu Ting was still laughing, his face full of smiles. But the next moment, when he saw the figure opposite Wang Chong, Lu Ting's eyes widened in shock. Lu Ting pays respect to Su Gong. Peng, Lu Ting's knees buckled, and he suddenly knelt before So Young-sun. His expression was respectful, and his body was trembling slightly. It was clear how shocked he was. Upon hearing Su Gong from Lu Ting's mouth, Wang Chong and So Young-sun's expressions changed as well. Other than Xin Hai and Meng Long, who were extremely loyal and reliable, Wang Chong didn't bring anyone else here. The reason why he didn't want others to know of Su Jingchen's identity was because he didn't want others to know of it. In this period of time when they played chess, Wang Chong had also never revealed So Young-sun's identity. This was already a tacit understanding. Lu Ting, on the other hand, revealed So Young-sun's identity the moment he arrived, ruining his painstaking efforts. Wang Chong, it seems like our fate has come to an end. So Young-sun stood up from behind the chessboard, and a powerful aura burst forth from his body like a tidal wave. This was the first time Wang Chong saw So Young-sun display his true strength. In an instant, Wang Chong seemed to see a majestic mountain rising from the ground in front of him. Moreover, it was growing at a speed that was several times faster than before. In the end, it reached the clouds and disappeared into the depths of the great void. In the face of this enormous aura, anyone could not help but feel a sense of insignificance. Ever since Emperor Taizong's death, So Young-sun had never revealed his name to the world. As such, many people thought that he was dead. The reason why he set up the chessboard in the Ghost Tree District, a place with ordinary people, was so that no one would know of his identity and attract attention. Now that Lu Ting had seen through him, this matter would probably spread throughout the entire court in less than a night. Elder. Wang Chong looked at So Young-sun, who had turned from an ordinary old man into a war god in an instant. He felt an indescribable feeling in his heart, as if he had lost something important. Wang Chong knew that from today onwards, the two of them would probably not be able to play chess anymore. It was also impossible for them to indulge in their usual behavior, eat some beef, and drink some wine in front of him. Just like So Young-sun said, "Our fate has come to an end. Kid, actually, I've wanted to tell you for a long time. We can't keep playing like this. It's just that this is your first day out of prison. That's why I didn't tell you." So Young-sun placed his hands behind his back, and his aura surged as he ignored Lu Ting on the ground. "Also, you should be participating in the new 3 great training camps that the court has opened, right?" "Yes." Wang Chong nodded, not denying it. The 3 great training camps would only be opened for 2 to 3 days, which was a short time. That was why Wang Chong had rushed to see So Young-sun as soon as he was released from prison. "Very well. Work hard. You have talent, so don't waste it." So Young-sun opened his palm, and a white chess piece flew up from the chessboard and into his palm. "Fate comes and goes. Fate comes and goes. This white chess piece is my gift to you. Take good care of it. I hope that you will be like this chess piece. No matter what happens, you will always be true to yourself and never forget your original intentions." Whoosh! The white chess piece entered Wang Chong's palm, and the originally calm space was suddenly filled with a strong gust of wind. So Young-sun's robes fluttered in the wind as he strode forward. This time, he was faster than he had ever been. "Don't forget your original intentions. Perhaps we will meet again. Otherwise, we will never meet again." Chapter 180. Sigh, Lu Ting, you spoiled my plans. After So Young-sun left, Wang Chong couldn't help but stomp his feet and sigh. It wasn't easy for him to keep this secret for several months. Even Shanhai and Meng Long didn't know the identity of this old man who played chess with them every day even though they had met So Young-sun before. In the end, Lu Ting's arrival ruined everything. "Plans? What plans?" "Wang Chong, tell me, how did you get to know Su Gong So Young-sun? Furthermore, you even know how to play chess with him." Lu Ting climbed up from the ground and grabbed Wang Chong. His expression was even more agitated than Wang Chong's. Lu Ting grew up listening to the legends of war god So Young-sun. There was even a portrait of him in Lu Ting's house. Many people said that Su Gong had already passed away. However, Lu Ting didn't expect to see So Young-sun here. The war god of the Tang dynasty, So Young-sun, was actually still alive. Furthermore, he was so robust and powerful. This was something that Lu Ting didn't expect. This was a miracle. Even though So Young-sun didn't even look at him once during the entire process, Lu Ting didn't mind at all. Instead, he felt that it was only natural. This was the true Su Gong. This was the true war god who looked down on the world with disdain. If Su Gong were to greet him warmly and softly, Lu Ting would suspect that he wasn't that Su Gong. However, this Su Gong was exactly the person he knew. Lu Ting was so agitated that he couldn't control himself. Wang Chong sighed in his heart. Lu Ting was clearly a fan of So Young-sun. His plan was ruined by Lu Ting and there was nothing he could do about it. "So, you were already here a few months ago?" After the two of them calmed down, Lu Ting roughly understood the situation from Wang Chong. "And if not for you, I might have been here for a few more months." Wang Chong said. Lu Ting's appearance was truly unexpected. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here to see Su Gong," Lu Ting said apologetically. So Young-sun of the great war god Su Gong had closed his door and refused to meet any guests for several decades. Strangers were not allowed to come near him and he had never received anyone. This was a well-known fact. Back then, before the rumor of Su Gong's passing had spread like wildfire, even the princes and grandsons didn't have the chance to enter the Su residence, let alone others. Wang Chong was favored by Su Gong So Young-sun and played chess with him here every day. If this was known to others, it would probably shock a lot of people. Even a fool would know that this was a great opportunity. However, it seemed like his unintentional arrival had ruined this opportunity and made things worse for him. Lu Ting was also filled with guilt. "Sigh, forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Tell me, how did you know I was here?" Wang Chong asked. Lu Ting did not hide anything and told him everything that had happened from beginning to end. It turned out that this was the first day Wang Chong was released from prison. The king of Song thought that Wang Chong must miss his family after being locked up in the imperial prison for a long time. Therefore, he planned to let Wang Chong reunite with his family first before paying a visit. In addition, the king of Song had just been reinstated and had to think of a way to deal with the troubles King Qi had dealt with in the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Justice. Therefore, when Wang Chong was released from prison, the king of Song didn't go to visit him. Later, when he felt that it was about time, he went to the Wang residence to visit Wang Chong. He didn't expect to hear that Wang Chong wasn't around and that even the Wang clan didn't know where he had gone. The king of Song didn't think much of it. He thought that Wang Chong would be back by nightfall. However, he didn't expect that Wang Chong still hadn't returned even though it was late at night and the stars were rising. He then asked Lu Ting to look for him. After hearing this, Wang Chong knew that it wasn't Lu Ting's fault. He had been locked up for 3 months. Today, when he met So Yong-sun, he was in the mood to play a little longer. He didn't expect that it would attract Lu Ting's attention. Speaking of which, he couldn't be blamed for this. Perhaps, as So Yong-sun said, this was heaven's will. The fate between the two had come to an end. After playing chess for several months, it was destined to end today. Lu Ting, how did you know that I was in the Ghost Tree District? Wang Chong suddenly asked with a frown. Isn't that easy? I've asked hundreds of hooligans in the capital to help me look for him. How could I not find him? Lu Ting said with a smile. However, as he spoke, he suddenly realized something and his expression changed. You finally realized it. The reason why Su Gong kept a low profile for so many years was that he didn't want others to know about him. You found so many hoodlums this time. I'm afraid that the news that Su Gong is still alive will spread like wildfire tomorrow. Who knows how many people will go to the Su residence? Wang Chong said calmly. Lu Ting glanced at the silhouettes around him and his face immediately turned ashen. Su Gong was much older than him, so he was filled with respect for him. Not just him, even his father, as well as those of his generation, as long as they had experienced and knew of Su Gong's deeds, Su Gong held an extraordinary weight in their hearts. He was a meritorious official of Taizong's era, a godlike existence in the entire Central Plains Tang dynasty. They couldn't even wait to respect and protect him, so how could they be willing to disturb his peace and disturb his peace? Wait a moment. In the darkness, Lu Ting's expression was grave. He suddenly turned around and walked toward those hoodlums. Wang Chong already knew what he wanted to do, so he didn't stop him. This was an unavoidable result, and it couldn't be changed no matter what. As expected, after a while, Lu Ting came over with an ashen face and boarded the carriage with Wang Chong. The two of them tacitly didn't mention So Yong-sun. Wang Chong, welcome back. Wang Chong met the king of Song in the Wang clan. The latter seemed to have been sitting there for a while. Upon seeing Wang Chong, he opened his arms and gave Wang Chong a big hug. The king of Song's admiration and favor for Wang Chong came from the bottom of his heart. Feeling the king of Song's enthusiasm, Wang Chong's mood also improved. Your Highness, congratulations on returning to your post and returning to the royal court. Wang Chong smiled and cupped his hands. At the level of the king of Song, there was no way for him to advance any further. Prince Consort was the highest title, and any higher would be equivalent to rebellion. Thus, returning to his original post was truly the best reward. It was comparable to being conferred the title of Marquis or Prime Minister. If not for you, how would I have the chance to return to the royal court? Not to mention returning to the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of War. The king of Song looked at Wang Chong with a strange look in his eyes. He didn't hide his admiration and favor at all. If Wang Chong hadn't reminded him in time and discovered the strangeness of the consort Taijin incident, he and all the other officials in the royal court would have been demoted and exiled. Although Wang Chong was only 15 years old, he was the real hero who helped him return to his original post and escape the disaster. For the real hero, Wang Chong was not stingy with his rewards. Wang Chong, you've helped me so much. Tell me, what reward do you want? No matter what it is, I'll agree to it. The king of Song said generously. Obviously, he was very happy. Wang Chong doesn't want anything. Thank you, Your Highness. Wang Chong shook his head and said, it wasn't his style to ask for rewards based on one's achievements. Ah, you don't want it, but I insist on giving it to you. Someone, help me bring that white-hoofed shadow over. The King of Song suddenly shouted outside. White-hoofed shadow? Before Wang Chong could react, he heard the faint neighing of Nei's horse coming from the direction of the stable in the courtyard outside. The sound was clear and childish, with a hint of metal to it. It was completely different from ordinary horses. A foal. Wang Chong was both surprised and delighted. He suddenly understood what the King of Song wanted to give him. It should be a foal. And when a foal grew up, it would be a warhorse. On the battlefield, a good warhorse wouldn't be inferior to a woozy steel sword. Nay. A short while later, a cloud of dust rose outside the courtyard. Amidst the cloud of dust, a green-colored colt with glossy fur immediately galloped over, its mane fluttering in the wind. As it galloped, its 4 hooves were particularly eye-catching. They were actually white. This made it look like it was floating in the air, giving it an indescribable sense of intelligence. Wang Chong almost immediately took a liking to this foal. The foal stopped in the courtyard. A stableman with a hood over his head and a jet-black body was leading it, leaving only his eyes visible. This is an imperial horse of the palace. It has the bloodline of the Great Snow Colt from the Great Snow Mountain Temple and the white-hoofed shadow of the Central Plains. The experts of the royal family have been carefully raising it. Their numbers are very few, and they've spent a lot of effort to raise one. These imperial horses are different from other horses. They're intelligent. If anyone feeds them for a month, they'll recognize that person as their master. They'll be loyal and they'll never change. Thus, when the stableman feeds them, he must wear a hood over his entire body and wrap it tightly. He mustn't let the foal see anything. The King of Song explained, when the white-hoofed shadow grows up, it'll have unparalleled strength. When it gallops, it'll be as fast as lightning. However, this isn't an ordinary white-hoofed shadow. The King of Song beckoned outside. Soon, 2 guards from the King of Song's residence carried a huge metal basin over. The metal basin was filled with water, and it was more than a foot deep. It was clear that these things had been prepared beforehand. The stableman led the foal into the huge basin. The next moment, to Wang Chong's astonishment, the foal didn't sink into the water. Instead, it floated on the surface like a goose feather. Water ripples automatically spread out from beneath its feet, making the colt look even more spirited and spirited. How is this possible? Wang Chong was dumbfounded. Similarly, the surrounding Wang clan members were also dumbfounded. The weight of this foal was definitely not low, but when it stepped on the water, it was as light as a feather. It didn't sink at all. This was simply inconceivable. This is the white-hoofed shadow raised by the palace. It treads on water and crosses rivers. The experts in the palace have done a great deal of hybridization and improvement on them. Perhaps you'll discover even more things in the future. How about it? Do you like this gift? The King of Song shook his sleeves as he said proudly, I like it, I like it. Wang Chong hurriedly nodded. What a joke. There was no way he would refuse such a high-quality horse. There weren't many such good horses in the world. In his previous life, by the time he became the Grand Marshal of the world, these spirited horses would have long been dead, injured, or exhausted in the years of war. Thus, even though he was the Grand Marshal of the world, Wang Chong had no fate with these top-notch spirit horses. Chapter 181. Ah, a good horse, a good horse. Wang Chong was overjoyed. Since the King of Song had given it to him, Wang Chong did not stand on ceremony. He walked over and took the white-hoofed shadow from the coachman. Although Wang Chong had never raised a horse before, he knew that the best horses on the battlefield were raised from a young age. From the moment they were born, they would be carefully cared for and raised. Only this kind of horse would be connected to one's heart. On the battlefield, it would be able to save one's life, lead one to kill the enemy, and rescue one from an encirclement. Wang Chong led the colt down from the basin and stroked it. The white-hoofed shadow's fur was so smooth that it felt as if his hand wouldn't be able to stick to it. It felt as if even a drop of water would slide off. Young master, if you give it this handful of beans, it will recognize you as its master in the future, the coachman said. The coachman beside him, who was wearing a headgear, took out a handful of soybeans from the pouch on his waist. Wang Chong took them and fed them to the white-hoofed shadow. As expected, after the horse ate the beans, it looked at Wang Chong and its expression immediately became much more intimate. It even placed its head on Wang Chong's chest. In his previous life, he had been bathed in blood for decades, and a warhorse was his second life. Wang Chong felt an instinctive sense of closeness toward a warhorse. As he stroked the sleek colt, Wang Chong felt as if he had regained the feeling of a powerful army from his previous life. He felt an urge to let out a long roar. But fortunately, in front of the King of Song, Wang Chong managed to restrain himself. It's not easy to raise a good spirit horse. In the future, you will need to constantly massage it to loosen its bones and muscles. In addition, you will need to use origin energy to open up its meridians. I have a cultivation technique that I obtained from the palace, specially prepared for these spirit horses. It can increase their strength, speed, and endurance. Take it. With a shake of the King of Song's finger, a palm-sized square piece of paper immediately flew out. Thank you, Your Highness. Wang Chong chuckled and took the paper. Although it was just a small piece of paper, Wang Chong knew that this training method was no less valuable than the white-hoofed shadow. By the way, Your Highness, I also have something for Your Highness. Wang Chong suddenly thought of something and said, Oh, what is it? The King of Song raised his eyebrows and asked with great interest. Wang Chong didn't say much. He led the pony into the study and took out the wooden box that Yang Zhao had given him. This is King Qi's letter. Consort Taijin really helped me. The King of Song looked at the letter in the box thoughtfully. Previously, it was because of Consort Taijin that Heech fell out of favor, and now that he was reinstated, it was also because of Consort Taijin. This left the King of Song with an indescribable feeling. This is probably the reason why Yang Zhao gave me this letter. Wang Chong nodded solemnly. Yang Zhao's letter wasn't for him, but for the King of Song. No matter what. At the very least, Consort Taijin chose us and not King Qi and the Yao clan. At the very least, this is beneficial to us, isn't it? The King of Song chuckled as he folded the letter in his hand and kept it. At the same time, he also made up his mind. Deep into the night, the Wang family residence was much livelier than in the day. Other than Wang Chong's little uncle, who had to return to Tianzhu Mountain, and the old master and old madam of the Four Quarters Embassy, everyone in the Wang family residence was present. The friendship between the Song and Wang clan, which spanned several generations, had missed in the day. Naturally, they couldn't miss out on such an important show. The King of Song, Lu Ting, and the old butler were all gathered together. The group of people put together 4 large tables and placed 50 to 60 dishes on the table. They ate happily and enjoyed themselves to their heart's content. In the past few months, this was the happiest meal that Wang Chong had ever had. Your Highness, do you still remember the promise you made to me before I was sent to the imperial prison? When the banquet came to an end, just as the King of Song was about to leave, Wang Chong suddenly spoke up. Of course I remember. Speak, no matter what it is, I'll agree to it. King Song chuckled, a forthright expression on his face. Wang Chong was currently the most outstanding rising star and advisor of the younger generation of the Song and Wang clan. At the same time, he was also the future strategist that the King of Song had high hopes for. After the Consort Taijin incident and the regional commander's incident, the King of Song was confident in Wang Chong's capabilities. I hope that Your Highness can transfer my big brother, Wang Fu, to the southwest of the Tang dynasty. To possible, transfer my father over as well. Wang Chong suddenly lowered his head and said earnestly. In the darkness of the night, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. Even the chirping of the cicadas had become much softer. Other than Wang Chong and the King of Song, there was no one else in the surroundings. Why? The King of Song stared at Wang Chong in astonishment. He didn't expect this to be the request of Wang Chong. Is this your big brother's wish? The King of Song's first reaction was that Wang Fu wanted to be transferred to the southwest. No. Wang Chong shook his head, an indescribable disappointment in the darkness. This is also why I hope that your highness can keep this a secret from my big brother. Right now, the entire empire's attention was focused on the north of the Ain Mountains, the increasingly powerful eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, the Annong Protectorate controlled by Zhang Shogui, and the Anxi Protectorate led by Gao Xianxi. This was currently the most frequently fought front in the empire. But Wang Chong knew that in the future, the empire's most bitter, most intense, and most costly war would be in the southwest, not the north. This war would shake the foundation of the empire. Its effects would linger for decades to come. Wang Chong didn't know if he could stop this war. He could only do his utmost to take precautions and prepare in advance. In his last life, he hadn't been able to participate in this war, hadn't been able to contribute his meager strength. This was a deep regret in Wang Chong's heart. In this life, no matter what, Wang Chong wouldn't miss out on this opportunity. Wang Chong, I really don't understand you. Seeing that Wang Chong wasn't willing to say more, the king of Song could only shake his head. If anyone else had said this or made such a strange request, he wouldn't have cared or responded. But Wang Chong was different. In the past few months, the king of Song's greatest feeling was that Wang Chong's way of thinking was completely different from ordinary people. Asking Consort Taijin to intercede on his behalf and restore him to his post was something that others wouldn't even dare to dream of. But Wang Chong had done it. The king of Song didn't dare to use common sense to judge some of Wang Chong's requests. But don't worry. I'll do it for you. In the name of the Ministry of War, your elder brother won't be suspicious. But your elder brother wants to fight on the battlefield. Aren't you afraid that he'll be angry if you transfer him to the southwest? The king of Song joked. As a younger brother, Wang Chong was really bold to transfer his elder brother. There's a war in the southwest that he wants. Wang Chong said. Oh. The king of Song glanced at Wang Chong thoughtfully. But soon he smiled, patted Wang Chong's shoulder, and walked toward Lu Ting in the distance. The two of them drove out of the Wang family's residence and disappeared into the night. With the departure of the king of Song, only the members of the Wang clan remained. Wang Chong glanced around and saw his cousin Wang Liang sitting alone under the eaves, munching on a blade of grass with a bored expression on his face. Recalling the request his big aunt and uncle had entrusted to him, Wang Chong immediately walked over to the other party. Cousin. Wang Chong sat down next to him. What is it? Wang Liang said absent-mindedly, as if he wasn't paying attention. Those who didn't know him might think that he didn't want to talk to him, but Wang Chong knew that his cousin's personality had always been like this. Cousin, it was aunt and uncle who asked me to come over. Wang Chong smiled. I already knew. Wang Liang said. He wasn't a fool. He already knew when Wang Chong talked to him. I heard that your wooden bird business failed and you paid back several hundred taels of gold? Wang Chong said. It was better to be direct with his cousin. Wang Chong had known him for 2 lifetimes, so he knew that he wasn't as dumb as he appeared. Thank you. I heard that my father helped you with your business and made quite a bit of money. He helped me fill in this sum of money. As Wang Liang said this, a hint of sadness flitted through his eyes. He had been ambitious ever since he was a child, wanting to become a tycoon. Alas, his ambition was higher than his talent, and many of his small businesses had failed. You don't have to count this sum of money on me. I just wanted to ask you if you're interested in going to sea. Wang Chong smiled. Did my father ask you to do it again? Wang Liang said. He didn't like being arranged by his parents. That's not it. It's just that I have some things overseas that I need to help you retrieve. As Wang Chong spoke, he began to think about those precious treasures that had been exposed on the islands of the sea. The world's 3 great swords, the Wuzi steel sword, broadsword, the Malayan kris sword, and the Japanese samurai sword. Even though time and space had changed and many things were different, some things were still the same. Wang Chong had already obtained the Wuzi steel sword, so Wang Chong subconsciously thought of the Malayan kris sword. The reason why the Malayan kris sword was famous wasn't because of how skilled the swordsmiths were, nor was it because of the advanced techniques used to forge the sword. Rather, it was because of the material used to forge the sword. Just like the Wuzi steel sword, the Malayan kris sword was also famous because of its material. However, unlike the Wuzi steel sword, The Wuzi steel sword was famous because it contained the world's sharpest, or Hyderabad. The Malayan Kris sword was famous because it also possessed the same sharpness and toughness, but this toughness came from beyond the heavens. The Malayan Kris sword was forged from the incomparably precious meteoric iron. From the Philippine Islands to the long reefs of India, there was a large amount of meteoric iron. No one knew in what era they fell. For a long time, these things were treated as ordinary rocks, and no one cared about them. It wasn't until thousands of years later that they were discovered by chance and made into weapons. In this world, there was no Philippine Islands, and Wang Chong had never been out to sea, be it in his previous life or this one. But since the Hyderabad ore existed in this world, why couldn't the meteoric iron exist in this world? As long as there was the slightest possibility, it would be a huge fortune. Chapter 182. These were truly ownerless objects. There was no need to bid a high price, and there was no need to sign a contract. Wang Chong only needed to find them and bring them over. Wuzi steel swords could be the best weapons, and these meteorites, if fused with Xian iron, would become the toughest armor. Each suit of Xian iron fused with a piece of meteorite would become the sturdiest armor. The meteorites on these islands could definitely be used to forge thousands of sets of sturdy armor. And when these sturdy armors were combined with the armies of the Tang dynasty and his own Wuzi steel swords, they would become an invincible and unstoppable force. For Wang Chong, this was the plan he had come up with from the very beginning, and it was also the direction he had always wanted to advance Indiana. The only problem was that the ocean was filled with all sorts of phenomena. The violent waves and the vile weather were enormous factors that needed to be overcome. Besides this, Wang Chong also needed someone who understood the ocean, or at least had a spirit of adventure. Wang Chong could not possibly go by himself. He simply had no time to split himself. Thus, Wang Liang was the best choice for Wang Chong. "So you want me to help you bring those stones back from overseas?" Wang Liang asked suspiciously after listening to Wang Chong's rough introduction. "Correct. Going overseas is very risky. The waves, the sea beasts, the weather, the direction, all of these are dangerous. The risks are great, and if you're not willing to go, I won't force you. But if you're willing, all the ships, guides, escorts, hired experts, food needed for the journey. I can arrange all of this for you. All the money needed will be on me." Wang Chong said, "But do you know how much money this will cost?" Wang Liang said, "I do." Wang Chong chuckled. A trip like this would take a very long time. It was already quite good to be able to come back once every half a year. And the cost of buying the ships and all the other miscellaneous expenses would probably not even be enough to cover 300,000 or 400,000. Unless it was an aristocratic family that specialized in sailing, many aristocratic families would not be able to afford such expenses. "But I don't care," Wang Chong said. "Are you serious?" Wang Liang seriously said, "Of course." Wang Chong nodded and said frankly, "We are relatives. How could I lie to you about this kind of thing? Let me think about it." Wang Liang's expression was a little panicked. Going to sea was something he had never thought about. In his entire life in the capital, he had never left this circle. He had never imagined that he would suddenly end up on a barren island tens of thousands of miles away. Wang Chong's words were too sudden. "Of course." Wang Chong smiled and didn't force her. "However, whether you agree or not, I hope you can discuss it with aunt and uncle before you make a decision." With that, Wang Chong stood up and walked into the house. "Wang Chong." But after walking for a while, cousin Wang Liang's voice came from behind him. Wang Chong turned his head and looked at him in surprise. He realized that cousin Wang Liang was looking at him in the darkness. His eyes were bright, and he was biting his lip as if he had come to some sort of decision. "I've thought it over. I promise you. I promise to help you find that meteoric metal." Wang Liang's voice seemed to be struggling with the first sentence, but by the end, his voice had become incomparably firm. It was like a butterfly finally breaking free of its cocoon. In the end, Wang Liang's mind yearned for the extraordinary. Grandeur, adventure, incomparable experience, and ambition, these were all things hidden deep in his soul. As he looked at Wang Liang under the eaves, Wang Chong's lips curled into a smile. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. Although it had been a day since he had been released from prison, the effects of this matter were still far from over. Paying respects to young master. On the morning of the next day, a dense crowd of more than 100 boys and girls stood in the courtyard of the Wang clan, bowing to Wang Chong on the steps with deferential expressions. So many. Standing on the steps, Wang Chong was shocked to see these youths who weren't any younger than him. He, didn't you say that you wanted to recruit some people? These fellows came here on their own accord. In the courtyard, Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, and the others stroked their beards as they chuckled gleefully. Gongzi, we came here on our own accord. Gongzi, we came here on our own accord. It's our honor to serve Gongzi. That the youths spoke with incomparable reverence in their eyes. They secretly glanced at Wang Chong as though he was their idol. The descendants of our 7 clans aren't the only ones here. The descendants of the other clans are here as well. You might not know this, but these youths view you as a hero. Even if you asked them to jump off a cliff, they wouldn't even bat an eyelid. Elder Yi whispered to Wang Chong with a chuckle that only Wang Chong could hear. There was no need for him to say it. Wang Chong could tell from the gazes of these youths. After spending 3 months in the imperial prison, Wang Chong didn't expect his influence to be so great among the descendants of his grandfather's old acquaintances. However, given the respect and reverence they were showing toward him, they wouldn't hesitate no matter what he asked them to do. But thinking about it, wasn't this what he wanted? Wang Chong knew that his grandfather's prestige and influence in the royal court was slowly adding an invisible halo to him, and this halo was swiftly taking effect. This was only the first batch. In the future, there would be more of them gathering under him. This was the strength of the prestigious clans. He was slowly bringing out the influence of the Wang clan. In the future, these people would be his first batch of loyal subordinates. With such thoughts in mind, Wang Chong took a step forward. This small movement immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the courtyard. Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, and the others also looked over curiously. I believe that all of you should know why I was imprisoned in the imperial prison this time. Before nearly 100 unfamiliar faces, Wang Chong began his first speech to his first batch of subordinates. The human heart was a delicate thing. Wang Chong knew that these people had heard of him in the past. They had heard of this and that before. But in the end, they still had to see him with their own eyes. He had to convey his ideals to them personally. When we are successful, we will rule the world. When we are poor, we will only care about ourselves. Every one of us has the heart to help the world. Today, we lack the strength to do so, so we can only submit memorials and move our lips. In the future, I hope to lead all of you into the battlefield and use your flesh and blood to defend the Tang dynasty and this world. The empire is facing a huge crisis. The conflict between the Hu and Han this time is only the tip of the iceberg. There are still countless dangers hidden beneath the iceberg. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean that they don't exist. The rise and fall of the empire is everyone's responsibility. In this era, you can choose to be mediocre and passively accept it. You can also choose to fight bravely and defend this world with your own strength. This is the reason why I gathered all of you here. You won't be able to enjoy glory and wealth, but every single one of you is a scholar of the empire. Even if no one remembers you, this land and the Tang dynasty will always remember you. Wang Chong's voice was deafening. Not only the 100 boys and girls, even old man Yi, Duke of Hu, and the others were dumbfounded. They knew that Wang Chong was going to lecture them, but they didn't expect Wang Chong to say such things. After a short moment of shock, everyone felt deep respect for Wang Chong. At the same time, the gazes that the youths directed toward Wang Chong also grew more and more intense. In their eyes, Wang Chong was a true hero. Anyone who could make 100 conferred generals fight for him and make the officials and generals of the royal court fly into a rage for him could be considered as a true hero. Wang Chong's speech, along with his previous experiences and performance, only made the crowd more respectful and convinced of him. I'm truly convinced. Of Duke Jiao's lineage, only he has the capability and courage to unite the hearts of the people. To be able to see such a talented person in our country in our twilight years. This is the fortune of our country, and it's also the fortune of us old bones. They heard Wang Chong's words clearly. Although they didn't understand why Wang Chong's words were suffused with a solemn and stirring flavor, whether it was the insight of when one is successful, one can rule the world, and when one is poor, one can only care for oneself, or the bold words of every man is responsible for the rise and fall of the world, these novel words had struck a chord in the hearts of the elders. The more they liked Wang Chong, the more they wanted to protect him, help him, and protect him. Under Wang Chong's arrangements, the 100 young men and women were swiftly led by a guard of the Wang clan to the spirit vein. Looking at their backs, Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh. Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, and the others thought that his words were too tragic, and the young men and women didn't understand his words at all. However, Wang Chong knew that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart, and it was the tragic reality that everyone would have to face in the future. The danger that the Tang dynasty would face in the future was far greater than what everyone could imagine. At least half of those who appeared in this residence would have to crawl by the borders of the empire, slumbering for the rest of their lives. To benefit the country, one's life and death is at stake. How can one avoid it because of misfortune? Since one had chosen this path, there was no room for retreat, regardless of whether it was him or them. As these thoughts flashed across Wang Chong's mind, he quickly buried them back into the depths of his heart. "Let him in." Wang Chong waved his hand and said to the door. Not long after, a thin figure swayed as he staggered into the room. Chapter 183. Zhang Monyan pays respect to Gongzi. "Thank you for saving my life." Looking at Wang Chong in the courtyard, Zhang Monyan's body trembled slightly. He bowed respectfully and bowed deeply. "It's you." Wang Chong was delighted. Meng Long had only said that an old friend of his had been waiting outside for a long time, but he didn't mention that the other party was Zhang Monyan. "Mister, please come in." Even if Zhang Monyan didn't appear, Wang Chong would still have gone to look for him personally. It wasn't to extort a favor from him, but for another matter. Now that Zhang Monyan had come knocking on his door, Wang Chong had been spared a lot of effort. Wang Chong led Zhang Monyan into the lounge and had the maids serve some fragrant tea before sitting down. "Gongzi, please forgive me. I should have gone over to welcome you when you were released from prison yesterday. However, there were many noble figures in Gongzi's sect, so I didn't dare to be rude. Thus, I waited a day and came to thank you personally." Zhang Monyan said, So you came yesterday. If Mr. had informed me yesterday, I would have surely gone out to welcome you personally." Hearing those words, Wang Chong's eyes lit up. "Where is Mr. staying at the moment?" "In the maple tree culvert in the west of the city." Zhang Monyan didn't expect Wang Chong to ask about this, and he hesitated for a moment before answering. "What?" Wang Chong was taken aback. Didn't Zhang Monyan mean that he had been roaming the streets for the past few days? "Didn't that eunuch Gao give you any money?" "He didn't. Instead, one of his guards gave me some silver coins." Zhang Monyan said. Wang Chong was taken aback. That eunuch Gao wasn't just an authoritative figure, he was deeply favored by the emperor. At the same time, he was also a magnanimous merchant. Wang Chong thought that the other party would at least give Zhang Monyan some money after he was released from prison. Nobles tend to be forgetful. Given the other party's standing, he might not have noticed such a small matter. Perhaps, he might even think that we are old acquaintances, and I have already made arrangements for him. I have been negligent. Wang Chong reacted immediately. Given that person's identity and standing, it was impossible for him to be bothered by a mere few thousand taels of gold. It was more likely that he had forgotten about it or misunderstood it. "Do you have any plans for the future, sir?" Wang Chong said. Zhang Monyan fell silent. The questions asked by Wang Chong were difficult for him to answer. What kind of future does a man on death row have? This time, when he was released from prison, he originally wanted to return to his hometown. However, not to mention the long journey and the lack of travel expenses. Even if he went back with his current reputation, would the villagers still accept him like before? Besides, how would he make a living? "I haven't thought about it yet. I'll just take it one step at a time." Zhang Monyan sighed. In prison he had not hesitated, but after coming out he really felt hesitant. How would he know what his future would be like? Sir, if you have nowhere to go, why don't you follow me? Wang Chong suddenly said. Gongzi, are you joking? Zhang Munyan was taken aback for a moment before replying in self-mockery. How can an old man like me be of any value to Gongzi? Wang Chong chuckled. He knew that this request was too abrupt, and Zhang Munyan didn't believe that he was serious. However, Wang Chong didn't argue with him. Instead, he picked up the fragrant tea on the table and sipped on it. I heard that Sir worked in the Ministry of Agriculture in the past. The reason for your imprisonment was due to embezzlement of 20,000 gold taels. Wang Chong put down the fragrant tea and said nonchalantly. Hearing those words, Zhang Munyan's face warped, and his mind buzzed. This matter was the deepest secret in his heart. In the prison, even when he was being beaten up, Zhang Munyan had never once mentioned this matter to Wang Chong. He didn't expect Wang Chong to see through him with a single sentence. How did you know? At this moment, Zhang Munyan seemed to have changed into a completely different person. Staring at Wang Chong, his eyes widened in fear. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead, and he looked extremely uneasy. Don't worry, I don't have any intention of pressuring you. Wang Chong's expression was as calm as ever. A lowly agriculture official of low standing had embezzled 20,000 gold taels. Before Wang Chong made a name for himself, this was a huge sum even for a prestigious clan like the Wang clan, needless to say, others. For Zhang Munyan to have embezzled so much money, those who didn't know him would think that he was a brazen scoundrel. However, to Wang Chong, the meaning behind this matter was completely different. If I'm not wrong, the 20,000 gold taels should have been used to compensate the farmers, right? Wang Chong's words were ordinary, and his voice wasn't loud or soft either. But in Zhang Munyan's ears, it felt as though a bolt of lightning had struck him. How did you know? Those words left his mouth, and Zhang Munyan widened his eyes in shock. He stared at the young man before him as though he had seen a ghost. If Wang Chong had exposed the reason why he was imprisoned for the 20,000 gold taels and exposed his secret, he would have felt guilty. But now, Zhang Munyan was truly in disbelief. Even the Bureau of Punishments, which was responsible for investigating the matter, wasn't able to find out that he had distributed the gold taels to the farmers. No one knew where the 20,000 gold taels went. Yet, the young man before him was able to expose it for him. If it was in the middle of the night, Zhang Munyan would have been frightened out of his wits. As I thought. Ignoring the shocked Zhang Munyan, Wang Chong heaved a long sigh. Zhang Munyan couldn't possibly spend so much money alone. From the moment he saw the file, Wang Chong already knew what was going on. No one could embezzle 10,000 gold taels without leaving behind any traces that even the experts of the Bureau of Punishments wouldn't be able to find out. Unless that person wasn't embezzling at all. There was a price to pay for any reform. The process of reform was filled with twists and turns, and it was destined that one would have to pay a huge price. There would be many failures along the way before one could find the correct path. In this world, other than Wang Chong himself, probably even Zhang Munyan himself didn't know the significance of the experiments he had been secretly conducting in the name of the government over the past few decades. In Wang Chong's plan, Zhang Munyan was a crucial link. His importance far surpassed that of the Hyderabad ores or the meteorites on the islands. Even the great yin-yang heaven creation art and art of god and demon obliteration couldn't compare to it. Food was the most important thing to the people. In this world of martial arts, everyone was pursuing power, status, wealth, reputation, and influence. Yet, other than Wang Chong, no one knew that there was another thing that far surpassed all wealth, status, power, and influence. It was inconspicuous, but it was the foundation of this world. It was food. How long would it take for the most powerful empire to fall from the glorious peak of having a luxurious life to the point of eating grass roots and tree bark? 10 years? 20 years? 50 years? 100 years? None of them. The real answer was a mere 2 years. This was a fact that Wang Chong had witnessed with his own eyes. Wang Chong had experienced the splendor of the Great Tang, but he had also seen its decline, and its miserable state of cannibalism. To those who lived in this world, this was an indescribable tragedy. When the Wang clan fell, the Wang clan wandered the world alone. Wang Chong would often go hungry for 2 to 3 days, and sometimes even longer. In those lonely days, Wang Chong had witnessed the sight of starving corpses strewn all over the ground. And Wang Chong's mother was the last person to fall into his embrace, her body emaciated. That moment was something that Wang Chong would never forget. Food was the most important thing to the people. No matter what time and space, this was a theme that would never change. When Wang Shichong and Li Shimin fought, the palace in Luoyang was filled with mountains of silk. Silk was the most valuable wealth, and the emperor rewarded his ministers with silk. But because there was no food in the city, the army starved and lost to Li Shimin. In Wang Chong's memory from another time and space, the year 755 was still peaceful and prosperous during the Tianbao era. When Tang Minghuang went to the warehouse to check, all the precious items, weapons, and food were still piled up like mountains. And in 759, Du Fu wrote 3 officials and 3 farewells. Don't say that the wine tastes thin and the millet fields are unplowed. Once war came, no one would farm the fields and food would become the biggest problem. Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty had many military achievements. He conquered the Xiongnu, pacified the western regions, and conquered Jiaoxi. But because of the war, many people died, and the fields were unplowed. This led to the decline of the Han Dynasty. In history, he was charged with the crime of using the military to build up power. Sometimes, war wasn't just a competition of military strength, equipment, and morale. There was also food. Wang Chong didn't think that Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty was wrong to use the military to build up power. However, he was wrong to not leave enough manpower to cultivate food. As long as there was sufficient food, the population would be able to flourish. Even if the population was depleted in war, there would still be more soldiers to replenish it. Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty didn't see this point, and that was why he was charged with using the military to build up power. The Tang Dynasty faced enemies from all directions: the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, the Uzun Empire, the Goguryeo Empire, the Abbasid Caliphate, Irai Mengshi Zhao. All of their enemies were fully fledged. No one knew better than Wang Chong how frequent wars the Tang Dynasty would face in the future. In these frequent and drawn-out wars, those who possessed food would have hope, and those who possessed food would have a future. In this empire, there was no one who held more weight than Zhang Munian. And there was no one who contributed more to the empire than Zhang Munian. When Wang Chong said before Gao Lishir that Zhang Munian was beneficial to the Tang Dynasty and the empire, he wasn't spouting nonsense. This person held the future of the empire in his hands. Even though he knew nothing about it, these thoughts flashed across Wang Chong's mind, and he soon calmed down. Mr. Zhang, if I were to say that I would provide you with sufficient funds, standing, and research facilities, what do you think? Wang Chong looked at Zhang Munian and suddenly asked. Chapter 184. Gong Gong. Gongzi, are you serious? Zhang Munian finally lost his composure. The reason why he was imprisoned and embezzled more than 20,000 gold taels was because there was no one who could support him. If he had sufficient wealth and authority, how could he have ended up in such a state? To Zhang Munian, Wang Chong's suggestion moved him greatly. In fact, it instantly overcame the unease he felt from having his secret exposed. Of course, if not to help you, I wouldn't have saved you in the first place. Wang Chong said impassively. Be it in his previous life or this one, there weren't many rumors about Zhang Munian. Wang Chong only knew that some of the paddy crops that he created after his death had slowly spread. Even though he wasn't able to change the fate of the Central Plains or the Tang Dynasty, at the very least, Wang Chong knew that there was a person named Zhang Munian who had been contributing to the Central Plains with his own strength. But at the very least, Wang Chong knew that there was a person named Zhang Munian who was silently contributing his strength to the nation. But at the very least, Wang Chong knew that there was a person named Zhang Munian who had been contributing to the Central Plains with his own strength. But to this world, their contributions were immense. From Shang to Xia, Zhou to Han, and finally Sui and Tang, The reason why humans were able to break away from hunting and increase their population was due to people like Zhang Monyan. It was their silent contributions that created the current Central Plains. Xia's grain production exceeded Shang's, Zhou's exceeded Xia's, and Han's exceeded Zhou's. By the time the Tang dynasty came into power, it had already far surpassed any of the previous dynasties. Just that, to Wang Chong, this bit of grain production was far from enough. It was far from enough to support the rapidly expanding Central Plains. Wang Chong's goal was to raise the grain production of the Central Plains to a whole new level. It was impossible for Wang Chong to achieve this with just his martial arts. There was nothing in this world that could achieve this. Wang Chong could only rely on his knowledge and experience from the other world. Great. Wang Gongzi, as long as you can give me sufficient support, I will definitely be able to breed a grain with a higher yield than what we have now. On the other hand, Zhang Monyan didn't think too much into it. He had no idea what Wang Chong was up to. Hearing that he was truly willing to support her, she was incomparably excited. Mr. Zhang. As Wang Chong poured a cup of tea for Zhang Monyan, he pondered over how he should break the news to him. You've worked in the Ministry of Agriculture for so long, I'm not sure if you've noticed. Some grains had a very high yield per plant. Is it even more productive than other grains? Of course. Taken aback, Zhang Monyan was taken aback. Wang Chong, a young master from a wealthy family, actually knew about grains. However, when he thought about how Wang Chong was willing to support him, he naturally had some understanding. Our Ministry of Agriculture's job is to find these high-yielding plants. Then, he would collect their seeds and think of ways to expand their cultivation. But it was useless. When these seeds were found, they might have a high yield. But when we planted it, it became a very ordinary plant. Some crops don't even bear fruit. Out of 100,000 experiments, it's already not bad if we can find a single high-yielding crop and maintain it. Throughout the generations, the mission of the Ministry of Agriculture was to search the paddy fields one by one. Through the vast field of paddy fields, they had to search for those that had a high yield. However, due to the uncertainties in the genetics of grains, the first generation of a crop might have a high yield, the second generation would have a high yield, and the third generation would have a low yield. Perhaps, it might only be the fourth generation that the crop would have a high yield again. But that would be meaningless. After all, when the yield was low, people might have already starved to death. It would already be fortunate for the fourth generation to have a high yield again. From this, it could be imagined how difficult it was for the Ministry of Agriculture to filter out the seeds. Zhang Monyan had grown up in the fields, and under the influence of his family, he had devoted his entire life to filtering out the seeds. Because of this, he was imprisoned and nearly lost his life. So the gold that disappeared was used by you to subsidize the farmers there, right? Wang Chong said. Before Wang Chong, there was no need for Zhang Monyan to hide the truth. There was a huge risk involved in the filtering of the seeds. The farmers who planted their own paddy fields only to have a low yield or even no harvest at all had to be compensated. Only then could the experiment continue. Zhang Monyan's 20,000 gold taels wasn't spent in a single day. Unknowingly, it had been spent bit by bit over the past 20 years. All of the gold was used to subsidize the farmers. Mr. Zhang, have you ever thought about those high-yielding crops? Why are some of them able to maintain their yield while others can't? Wang Chong pondered as he carefully imparted his opinion to Zhang Monyan. Zhang Monyan was taken aback. He had never thought about this before. His filtering work wasn't any different from the others. He was already used to the instability of the crop's yield generation after generation. He had never thought about why or what the problem was. I've never thought about it before. Zhang Monyan shook his head. This was the first time someone had raised this question to him. Then, Mr. Zhang, have you ever thought about the possibility that these grains might be similar to humans? There's a male sterile line and a male maintainer line. This would explain why a high-yielding crop might not reap a single harvest the next year. Wang Chong finally revealed his opinion. Zhang Monyan stared at the young man before him as though he had seen a ghost. He had never heard of such a theory in his entire life before. You must be joking to know that plants could be divided into males and females. However, Wang Chang's words had opened up his train of thought. Furthermore, it wasn't entirely unreasonable. This was indeed a brand new way of thinking in the filtering of paddy fields. I've never thought about it before. Zhang Munian fell into deep contemplation. He didn't reject Wang Chang's theory. Wang Chong had been staring at Zhang Munian's eyes the entire time. Upon seeing that the other party didn't reject his suggestion, he heaved a long sigh of relief. It was a brand new theory, a theory that was ahead of its time. The biggest problem was that it could not be accepted by others. Clearly, Zhang Munian wasn't such a person. He had found the right person. Mr. Zhang, I'm thinking that if we can find the male sterile line and maintainer line of this crop and differentiate them separately, wouldn't it be helpful for future planting and seed production? Besides, paddy fields are different from humans. Humans have male and female, but the male and female of paddy fields might not be the same as humans. Since there's a male sterile line, perhaps there's a recovery line that can turn these paddy fields back into maintainer lines? Wang Chong finally revealed his three systems method of paddy fields. In the other world, the three systems method of paddy fields was the essence of hybrid rice. Even though it was just a theory, its effects were epoch-making. At times, only by knowing the direction could one exert the right effort. If one were to face the ground, it was only a matter of time before one found water. On the other hand, if one were to dig a well in the sky, one could forget about drinking water for the rest of one's life. Wang Chong didn't have any hybrid rice, so he couldn't provide any seeds. As for the problem of farming and filtering, Wang Chong knew nothing about it. And the three systems method of paddy fields was all that Wang Chong knew. Left with no other choice, Wang Chong could only find a way to nurture a high-yielding, hybrid rice in this world bit by bit. And Zhang Munian was the best candidate that Wang Chong could think of to accomplish all of this. As long as Zhang Munian could find three different types of paddy fields, the quality of the food of the Tang dynasty would soar. Food is the heaven of the people. This is the foundation of the future. Regardless of whether it was the continuous wars or the fight against the powerful foreign invaders, these were the foundations that Wang Chong relied on. I need to think about it carefully. Gongzi's words are truly unheard of. I've never heard of such a concept in my entire life. However, I'm willing to give it a try. Zhang Munian said gravely. Wang Chong's three systems method of paddy fields made his heart pound in agitation. If he could figure out why the high-yielding properties of paddy fields couldn't be maintained, he might just be able to create a true high-yielding paddy field. Gongzi, can you give me a plot of land? I'm willing to do my best to give it a try. Zhang Munian lifted his head, and a bizarre glint flashed across his eyes. Of course. However, it won't be here, but somewhere else. I've already arranged the location for you. That will be the best place for you to conduct your experiments. Wang Chong smiled. Zhang Munian lifted his head in astonishment. May I know which place Gongzi is referring to? Jiaoji. Wang Chong smiled. The paddy fields in Jiaoji had 3 harvests in a year. Furthermore, there was a huge amount of manpower there. If Zhang Munian wanted to conduct his experiments on paddy fields, that would be the best place. Furthermore, 3 harvests in a year would shorten the time required for Zhang Munian to conduct his experiments on hybrid rice in the shortest time possible. Zhang Munian soon left. Along with him were 100,000 gold taels and 50 guards that Wang Chong had mobilized from Big Uncle Wang Zhen, the Wang clan, Elder Yi, and Duke of Hu. The group of people didn't alert anyone, and they quietly headed towards the south. At the same time, the 2 letters Wang Chong wrote had also reached the hands of Big Uncle Wang Zhen and the King of Song, Li Qingqi. For a small matter like demarcating a plot of land in Jiaoji for Zhang Munian to conduct his experiments, Big Uncle Wang Zhen and the King of Song could handle it. The Yao clan and King Qi probably wouldn't care about something as distant as Jiaoji. I've already given you all that I can. Whether the Tang dynasty will be able to survive the calamity will depend on you. Sitting in the study, gazing in the direction where Zhang Munian left, Wang Chong muttered to himself. No one knew better than him whether the Tang dynasty would be able to survive the calamity, and whether the Central Plains would be able to survive wasn't dependent on him. Rather, it was on a 50-year-old agriculture official. Chapter 185. After settling the matter regarding Zhang Munyan, Wang Chong allocated a huge sum of several 100,000 gold taels to cousin Wang Liang for him to purchase a fleet of ships, as well as to recruit sailors and soldiers. With the contract he had with the Zhang clan, Wang Chong was able to afford this sum of money. It's about time for me to take a look at the royal palace. After everything was settled, Wang Chong sighed deeply before getting onto the carriage heading toward the royal palace. At the entrance of the royal palace, an imperial army member was already waiting for him. "Follow me." Without saying a word, the imperial guard led Wang Chong to and fro through the winding corridors of the royal palace. After an unknown period of time, an underground entrance appeared before Wang Chong. Above the entrance there were only 2 words, "Death Prison." The words were mottled, and the paint was peeling. At the entrance, 12 muscular chamberlains of imperial insignia stood in a straight line, guarding the entrance expressionlessly, reminiscent of demonic gods. This was the death prison. The prisons of the royal palace were divided into the imperial prison and death prison. The most serious criminals were locked in the imperial prison, and the Holy Emperor would judge their life and death. Most of them would find it hard to get out. On the other hand, the prisoners in the death prison were slightly lighter. Wang Chong's second brother, Wang Bei, was locked in the death prison. Sitting in the carriage, Wang Chong gazed through the window at the entrance of the death prison guarded by the 12 black-armored chamberlains of insignia, and he heaved a long sigh. Of the 4 siblings of the Wang clan, the one who was closest to Wang Chong wasn't his eldest brother, Wang Fu, nor his youngest sister, Wang Xiaoyao, but his second brother, Wang Bei. His eldest brother, Wang Fu, was much older than him, and he had joined the military a long time ago. The one who had grown up with him was his second brother, Wang Bei. But as they grew older, not only did the relationship between the 2 of them not improve, it even grew more distant. This was a deep regret for Wang Chong. Wang Chong knew why, and it was precisely because he knew that he felt even more regretful. In this Kunwa training camp, if there was one person that Wang Chong wanted to see the most, then it had to be his second brother, Wang Hua. "Open it for me." Alighting from the carriage, Wang Chong took out a token and waved it in front of the 12 black-armored chamberlains of insignia. This was the waist token of the King of Song. With this token, Wang Chong would be able to access most of the places in the royal palace. Boom. After glancing at Wang Chong's waist token, one of the black-armored chamberlains of imperial insignia slowly opened the door. Buzz! Cold air gurgled, and a gust of black and cold underground mist surged up from the ground along with the airflow. Wang Chong frowned slightly and stepped into the underground tunnel. It was very quiet in the underground tunnel. Walking inside, Wang Chong could hear his own clear footsteps. In a special cell, Wang Chong finally met his second brother. This was a specially made cell, and the space was much larger than any other cell. Its bars and pillars were all as thick as the mouth of a bowl, and they were all made of deep-sea mystic iron with inscriptions. And in the center of this cell, a thin figure was sitting cross-legged and motionless, looking like he had been tortured. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes were sunken. His limbs and torso were bound by a total of 5 thick chains. Like a spider's web, they crisscrossed and locked him down from all directions. This was his second brother, Wang Hua. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Wang Chong would not have believed that this thin figure before him was the arrogant and domineering second brother of his memories. "Second brother, I'm here. I'm sorry that I only came to see you now." As he gazed at the disheveled and tortured figure in the cell, Wang Chong suddenly felt an unbearable pain in his heart. This wasn't how his second brother should look like. This dark and damp prison was definitely not a world that belonged to him. The cell was silent. Other than Wang Chong's voice, there was no reply. The figure in the cell didn't move, as if he couldn't hear anything. "Second brother, we all missed you. Big brother missed you, little sister missed you, mother and I missed you too. Come out, second brother. You don't belong here." Wang Chong sighed. The death cell was a place to imprison prisoners, But Wang Chong knew that his second brother was completely different from these people. Because he had imprisoned himself here. Everyone in the Wang clan who had contracted the Berserker syndrome could freely enter the death cell. This was a favor that the Holy Emperor had bestowed upon his grandfather. It had been specially requested by his grandfather after he had become a dragon. This expensive cell had been specially constructed by the Holy Emperor. All descendants of the Wang clan who had contracted the Berserker syndrome could enter and imprison themselves. For this generation, it fell to second brother Wang Bei. He had been exiled, and other than himself, no one could let him out. The cell was silent, not a single sound could be heard. Sighing, Wang Chong continued, "That's right. Second brother, if you're doing this for the eldest son of Duke Zheng, then there's no need. He has already recovered, he's not dead. Do you think I'm like this because of Marquis Zheng?" A cold voice suddenly echoed from the cell, interrupting Wang Chong's words. At some point, Wang Bei had raised his head, and his bloodshot eyes were staring coldly at Wang Chong through the bars. "Second brother." Wang Chong was taken aback, and then he was overjoyed. "You're finally willing to speak to me. Do you really think that I'm here because of him?" Wang Bei seemed to be oblivious to Wang Chong's words. He continued to stare at Wang Chong emotionlessly. Scram right now. I don't need you to see me, and I don't need anyone to see me. Scram. His final word was like a thunderclap, and a furious gale swept through the death cell. Even with Wang Chong's origin energy tier 7 cultivation, might of the barbaric god, and the serpent dragon bone, he was still forced to retreat. Even though he was suffering from the Berserker syndrome, Wang Chong's second brother Wang Bei was definitely one of the top experts in the capital. The furious gale left just as quickly as it came. In just a few moments, the death cell had calmed down once more. Wang Bei sat cross-legged in the prison, regaining his calm. "Second brother, since it's not because of Marquis Zheng, why aren't you leaving?" Wang Chong stared at the figure in the cell, but he didn't back down. He came here to change a matter, and before he was done, he wouldn't leave. Wang Bei remained motionless, as if he hadn't heard Wang Chong's voice. But Wang Chong didn't give up. "Given your abilities, this place isn't enough to keep you here. It's been more than half a year since you came here. Do you intend to stay here for the rest of your life?" As Wang Chong spoke, he began to walk toward the bars of the cell. "Don't force me to make a move on you. Get out right now." Wang Bei finally reacted. He stretched out a hand and pointed toward the exit of the death cell, and his voice was cold. "Second brother, the Berserker syndrome isn't impossible to overcome. Given your abilities." "Berserker syndrome. Haha, you're talking to me about the Berserker syndrome. Do you know what the Berserker syndrome is?" Rumble. The chains slid and clattered. Amidst the violent vibrations, a strong sense of danger suddenly rose in Wang Chong's heart. Boom. Amidst the clattering of metal, a thin face, pale skin, and bloodshot eyes suddenly appeared in Wang Chong's vision, exuding an enormous killing intent. This sudden turn of events was cold, icy, and bloodshot, and filled with killing intent. It was enough to give people nightmares. Even those with extraordinary willpower would tremble in fear and stagger back when stared at by these eyes, but Wang Chong didn't. Wang Chong stared into those demonic and callous eyes, brimming with bloodlust and bloodlust. Their gazes met as they stood there, motionless, not even the slightest intention of retreating. "This time, I definitely won't retreat." As Wang Chong gazed at those red and bloodshot eyes and that face that had turned pale from not seeing the sun for so long, a deep sorrow flitted through his eyes. Wang Chong was here to atone for his sins. In truth, Wang Chong already knew why second brother Wang Bei had exiled himself here. The Berserker syndrome was a curse carried by the members of the Wang clan. Once it flared up, they wouldn't recognize even their own kin. Second brother was afraid of harming his family, afraid of harming Wang Chong and his little sister, so he feigned coldness and sealed his heart, causing Wang Chong and his little sister to distance themselves from him. He wanted to create a rift between them so that Wang Chong would distance himself from him. The pain of the Berserker syndrome wasn't frightening, nor was the feeling of loneliness. What truly hurt second brother was the fear of his family. It was a pity that Wang Chong didn't know this in his previous life. The first time Wang Chong saw him after he flared up, he staggered back. That was when he was young. It was then that he forever distanced himself from Wang Chong. In his memory, the person who was closest to him, the person who would carry him on his shoulders on snowy days, had disappeared. In his place was the cold, distant Wang Bei who suffered from the Berserker syndrome. And the second time was right here. It was right before this pale face and bloodshot eyes that Wang Chong personally sent him into the abyss. He had lost this second brother for good. That small step back had completely severed him. It had also made Wang Chong regret it for the rest of his life. There were many things that could only be understood in the past. There was no way to make up for the mistakes of his previous life. In this life, no matter what, Wang Chong would never back down. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you? Wang Bei looked at the calm-looking Wang Chong by the fence and was stunned. Why should I be afraid? You are my second brother. You are now, you were in the past, you will be in the future, and you will be forever. I'll be afraid of anyone, but I won't be afraid of my second brother. Through the fence, Wang Chong spoke calmly without the slightest hint of evasion. These were Wang Chong's heartfelt words. In this life, no matter what, he wouldn't let his second brother leave. Although the Berserker syndrome was an incurable disease, Wang Chong was willing to do his best to save his second brother. Wang Bei was stunned. A trace of pain and fear suddenly flashed across his bloodshot eyes. His footsteps staggered, and he abruptly let go of the fence and retreated. Go, go, go. I don't want to see you. Leave this place. This isn't a place you should be. Wang Bei's hair was disheveled, and his back was facing Wang Chong. He waved his hands as he tried to expel Wang Bei, his voice filled with intense pain. Seeing his second brother's appearance, Wang Chong's heart violently twitched. However, Wang Chong didn't show it on his face. Second brother, there's nothing that can't be defeated. The Berserker syndrome is inherited through the bloodline, not through the mind. I hope that you will remember these words. Don't be a slave to your heart. Use your mind and your will to defeat the Berserker syndrome in your bloodline. There's nothing that our Wang clan can't defeat. We definitely won't be controlled by the Berserker syndrome. I believe in you, Wang Chong said in a low voice. In the prison, when Wang Bei heard the words "Don't be a slave to your heart," his body suddenly trembled, but he quickly calmed down. Go, don't disturb me anymore. Wang Bei waved his hands. Wang Chong looked at Wang Bei's back, a trace of sadness flashing across his eyes. Second brother, I actually came here this time to say goodbye to you. I'm going to join the Kunwa training camp soon. Time doesn't wait for me. The Tang dynasty is facing many dangers, and I might have to enter the battlefield soon. There are some things that I won't tell others, but I can tell you. In the future, the great Tang will be plunged into chaos. I don't know if my plan will succeed. Maybe it will fail. But even if I die on the battlefield, I won't regret it. Just as Wang Chong said these words, the Stone of Destiny's voice sounded in his mind. Warning, the host is attempting to cross the boundary. 10 destiny energy has been deducted. If there's a second time, kill. An intense pain came from every part of his body. Wang Chong's face paled, and his hands began to twitch in his sleeves. But Wang Chong didn't show it, instead continuing to speak. Second brother, I need your help. If it's possible, leave this place and come help me. Although the Berserker syndrome is a hindrance in the capital, it isn't a problem on the battlefield. I hope that you can help me. After saying these words, Wang Chong turned and walked out. Behind him, Wang Bei remained motionless. Only when Wang Chong disappeared into the corridor did he turn his head and look at Wang Chong's back, a complicated expression in his eyes. Little brother. Chapter 186. Early in the morning, Wang Chong sat cross-legged on the floor of his bedroom, motionless. On his abdomen, there were 2 balls of light, one large and one small, one gold and one silver. They looked like 2 miniature suns and moons. The suns and moons trembled slightly, attracting each other. Under the influence of the 2 balls of light, the surrounding origin energy of the world surged towards Wang Chong and entered his body. This was the little yin-yang art that Wang Chong had just learned. Putting aside the cultivation aspect of this art, the speed at which he absorbed origin energy from the world was much faster. Wang Chong originally cultivated the might of the barbaric god, and now that he had this little yin-yang art, his strength naturally grew even faster. As time passed, Wang Chong sat on the floor motionlessly, his aura growing stronger and stronger. After an unknown period of time, suddenly, as if a gust of wind had passed through, a vast energy distorted the void and flew through the study like a steaming mirror. Wang Chong's body also began to ripple and distort in the steam. Congratulations, host, for successfully overcoming the second world constraint. Consumed 30 points of destiny energy. Remaining destiny energy, 15 points. Next world constraint, 6 months later. Consumed 40 points of destiny energy. The vast energy disappeared from the room, and at the same time, the stone of destiny's voice sounded in Wang Chong's ears. Wang Chong let out a long sigh and opened his eyes, his body drenched in sweat. I've survived another tribulation. The world shackle was said to last for 3 months, but it was actually between 3 to 4 months. However, even though he had experienced it once, it was still not enough. However, even though he had already experienced it once, Wang Chong still felt like a nightmare. However, even though his body was sore and his stamina was exhausted, there were still benefits. But it wasn't as if there were no benefits. After resisting the world constraint, Wang Chong could clearly sense that his bones had become more compact, and his muscles and tendons had become more resilient and powerful. Not only that, Wang Chong could also clearly feel that a portion of the power had turned into Yuan Qi and was pouring into his meridians. Just this little bit of power was equivalent to 3 months of bitter cultivation. Compared to before the world shackles, his power had clearly increased by quite a bit. The world bind's consumption is increasing. The first time it was 20 points, the second time it reached 30 points, and the fourth time it reached 40 points. Wang Chong felt a lingering fear when he thought of this. If not for the fact that he had unintentionally obtained 50 destiny energy from the Consort Taijin incident and the regional commander's incident, he would have been killed long ago. Moreover, the power of the world constraint grew stronger each time. The second time was much stronger than the first. These things couldn't be easily resisted. Fortunately, the time interval is getting longer and longer. The first time is 1 month, the second time is 3 months, and the third time is 6 months. Otherwise, I really wouldn't have been able to persist. Wang Chong thought to himself, feeling the heavy pressure. After not acting up for a few months, he had almost forgotten about the world constraint. But this time, Wang Chong was beaten back to his original state. If he didn't have enough destiny energy, he would probably be killed very quickly. However, 6 months is enough. It's enough to do a lot of things. Wang Chong thought to himself and quickly calmed down. Changing fate was not that simple. The greater the change in fate, the more people changed, and the wider the scope, the greater the world constraint. With regards to this result, Wang Chong was not surprised. Moreover, 6 months was a very long time. King. After sitting cross-legged on the ground for a moment to recover his strength, Wang Chong suddenly thought of something and pulled out a sword from his waist. This sword was not Wang Chong's famous wood-steel sword, but a meter-long sword. Its blade was crimson, and dark inscriptions resembled the scales of a snake could be seen on its surface. The sword didn't look as sharp as the wood-steel sword, but it had a unique aura. Is this the little yin-yang sword? Wang Chong looked at the sword in his hand and blinked. A strange light flashed in his eyes. This sword was sent by Wang Chong's master on the Spirit Vein Mountain, the evil emperor, after learning that Wang Chong had completed the little yin-yang art. The martial arts of the demonic emperor Old Man's lineage were different from ordinary martial arts. Ordinary martial arts, as long as one trained diligently, would definitely be able to reach a higher realm. But the little yin-yang art was different. Only by using the little yin-yang art to continuously absorb the opponent's energy could the little yin-yang art be refined and reach a higher realm. In other words, it was to kill. This was also the reason why the evil emperor was known as the evil path and why he had angered so many people in the world of sex, even causing him to be hunted down by so many. The level of the little yin-yang art was too low, so it could only absorb the energy of opponents much weaker than itself. Wang Chang's realm could only be that of a tiger, leopard, or cat. This was why the evil emperor's faction had invented the little yin-yang sword. The little yin-yang sword can only help you absorb the last bit of energy of your opponent when they are on the brink of death or extremely weak. Just as you said, the little yin-yang sword is used for righteousness, and when used for evil, it is evil. You are the son of a duke, so you have to be wary of your identity. As for what you should do, I won't tell you. You can decide for yourself. These words had not been sent by the demonic emperor old man, but in a short letter. The cultivation techniques of the evil path were unique and difficult for others to accept. Especially this kind of killing technique, it was even more difficult for people to accept it. In the evil emperor's view, given that Wang Chong was from a family of ministers and generals, it would be inappropriate for him to learn this martial art. However, the evil emperor was overthinking things when it came to Wang Chong. The little yin-yang art is most suitable not for sex or personal fights. It is for the battlefield. This martial art can only be accumulated quickly on the battlefield and reach an extremely high level in a short period of time. Master, you're overthinking things. Wang Chong said calmly. His fingers slowly brushed across the crimson blade, emitting a clear hum. It was true that the little yin-yang art and the great yin-yang heaven creation art were evil martial arts, but from the start, Wang Chong had never intended them to be used to make a name for himself, but to be used on the battlefield. The problems that his master, the evil emperor, worried about were non-existent to Wang Chong. Dee-da-da. Just as Wang Chong was deep in thought, the sound of hooves galloping and the neighing of war horses could be heard. Ah, Wang Chong, are you ready? The training camp is about to begin. Wei Hao's voice was full of vigor, and it reverberated throughout the Wang family residence. It's here. With a smile, Wang Chong sheathed the little yin-yang sword and stood up. After such a long time, the most important event in the history of the great Tang dynasty finally happened. The three great training camps, Kunwu, Shunwei, and Longwei, had finally begun. Today was the day they would officially open. After settling the matters on hand, Wang Chong made an appointment with Wei Hao to set off together with him today. After bathing and changing into a clean set of clothes, he put on a golden crown and pinned it with a hairpin. Feeling refreshed, Wang Chong walked out of the room dressed in a loose robe, looking like a dashing, elegant, and carefree person. Nay! As soon as Wang Chong walked out of the room, the neighing of a young steed sounded, and with a flash of light, a floating shadow leaped into his embrace. The indigo colt chewed on the leaves that it had torn from the courtyard, and its mane danced in the wind as it licked Wang Chong affectionately. Wang Chong reacted quickly. He took out a cloth pouch from his waist and took out a handful of soybeans. Holding them in his hands, he fed it to the colt personally. A spirit colt was indeed a spirit colt. In just 2 short days, this white-hoofed shadow raised in the palace had already begun to treat Wang Chong as its true master. And Wang Chong also treated it as a human. Instead of locking it in the stable, he placed it in the courtyard and allowed it to run freely, go wherever it wanted, and eat whatever it wanted. This would make the colt more intelligent, and it would also aid its growth. Little shadow. Let's go, I'll bring you to a bigger place today. After the colt finished eating the soybeans in its hands, Wang Chong patted its neck and led it forward. At the entrance of the Wang family residence, a row of people was already waiting. Young master. Upon seeing Wang Chong, Shenhai, Menglong, Tuoba Guan, Li Zhuxin, and Mayasame Ayaka immediately lowered their heads and bowed. Even though Li Zhuxin didn't lower his head, he still nodded slightly in acknowledgement. Let's go. Wang Chong smiled. Passing through the gates, a few majestic war steeds were waiting outside. Wei Hao, along with a group of followers, sat on the backs of the steeds, looking spirited. On the other side, Zhao Jingdian was leading a few war steeds, waiting for Wang Chong. Beside him were Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, and the others. Today was the opening of the 3 great training camps, and this was Wang Chong's first time joining the army. Thus, those who received the news had already rushed over to send him off. Chonga, this is your first time joining the army. Mother isn't around, so you have to learn how to take care of yourself. The first madam stood by the door with reddened eyes, and she seemed a little sad. Even though Wang Chong had yet to officially join the army and was only participating in the training camp, this was the first time Wang Chong had left his side. The young bird had grown up, and it was finally time for it to enter a wider world. Mother, don't worry. I will. Wang Chong smiled. Brother, I heard that the people there are formidable. If they dare to bully you, tell me and I'll deal with them for you. The Wang family's little sister leaned into her mother's embrace, puffed up her cheeks, and waved her little fists around. Just like the vast crane pavilion, she looked as though she was going to stand up for Wang Chong. Wang Chong chuckled inside. Right now, only his little sister still treated him as the weak brother from before. Little sister, I understand. Don't pinch my nose. Otherwise, I won't be happy. That seeing how his little sister was about to fly into a rage, Wang Chong burst into laughter. Retreating, he pulled open the distance between them. Mother, little sister, and elders, I'll be leaving first. After bidding farewell to everyone, Wang Chong suddenly leaped onto his steed and left with Li Zhuxin, Mayasame Ayaka, Wei Hao, and Zhao Jingdian. Chapter 187. Dida. The capital was bustling with people, and one cavalry after another was rushing out from the east, west, and south gates of the capital. These cavalrymen weren't from the capital's imperial army or the border army, but high-spirited scions of the capital. The scions of nobles, descendants of generals, scions of prestigious clans. There were all kinds of people on horseback. It sure is lively. Wei Hao sat on his horse and watched the scene from its back. He laughed excitedly and said, "That's right. Wang Chong, look, there are so many people here." Wang Chong nodded, but his eyebrows indiscernibly twitched. Perhaps it was because he had changed the world too much, but Wang Chong realized that the three great training camps were completely different from what he remembered. In the past, the three great training camps didn't attract so much attention. The first time it was opened, it didn't attract so many scions of nobles and nobles either. Furthermore, the number of people recruited by the three great training camps was much higher than in his previous life. Looks like everything is different now, Wang Chong thought. Changing the world recklessly wasn't without a price. This price wasn't just reflected in the world constraint, it was reflected in other things as well. Wang Chong couldn't tell whether this change was good or bad. But regardless of whether it was good or bad, he had no choice. No matter what, at the very least, the three great training camps haven't changed. With this thought in mind, Wang Chong, Wei Hao, Zhao Jingdian, and the others headed for the east gate. In just a moment, they were already on the official road and galloping away. Many news regarding the three great training camps had already been released. The establishment of the training camps was proposed by the Holy Emperor and approved by the Bureau of Military Personnel, Bureau of Punishments, Bureau of Works, Bureau of Revenue, and Bureau of Personnel. With the cooperation of the Imperial Army, the three camps of Longwei, Shenwei, and Kunwo were set up. The camps would be set up on the east, west, and north sides of the capital, in a mountain range 20 li away. The distance was neither too far nor too short. If it was too far away, the three great training camps would easily lose their protection. It would not be safe enough. And if they were too close, they would all be heading toward the capital, and training would be impossible. The Kunwa training camp that Wang Chong and the others had chosen was in the mountains in the east. They followed the official road to the east and then entered a small path. After about 6 hours, Wang Chong and the others finally saw a huge mountain range. It towered into the clouds, like a prehistoric giant beast standing in the middle of the mountains. The peak of the mountain was not covered with lush trees, but with wooden palaces, buildings, and training grounds. Hundreds and thousands of banners that symbolized the Tang dynasty were scattered all over the mountains, fluttering in the wind. The largest, thickest, and tallest yellow banner was at least 100 meters tall, and the two golden red characters on it fluttered in the wind. Even from a distance, Wang Chong could still see the two characters. Great Emperor! Come with. What an imposing sight! Seated on the back of a horse, Wei Hao gazed into the distance with an exaggerated expression. The others didn't finish their words, but the sight before them had left their hearts trembling. Of the 3 great training camps, Kunwu was meant for the commoners. If even Kunwu had such an imposing sight, it was easy to imagine how Shenwei and Longwei would fare. The royal court dispatched the Bureau of Military Personnel, Bureau of Punishments, Bureau of Revenue, and the Imperial Army to work together. The results are indeed extraordinary, Wang Chong thought as he gazed into the distance. In his previous life, Wang Chong had no fate with the 3 great training camps. Besides, the 3 great training camps weren't a place that ordinary people could approach. As such, this was the first time Wang Chong was seeing the Kunwa training camp. Even though they were both in terms of construction, his spirit vein probably started earlier than the 3 great training camps. However, in terms of scale, it was truly a far cry from the Kunwa training camp. Wei Hao, don't get careless when we reach the mountain. Kunwa training camp is one of the weakest of the 3 great training camps. However, if you think that you are invincible in there and that you will surely be able to enter the training camp, I'm afraid that you'll have to wait until the second batch opens. Wang Chong suddenly said to Wei Hao. The Kunwa training camp was just ahead, and his brothers were right beside him. There were some things that Wang Chong had to inform them in advance. You must be joking. I am an Origin Energy Tier 7 expert, and I have already cultivated the mountain ascension formula that you gave me. Is everyone in the Kunwa training camp at Origin Energy Tier 8? Wei Hao let out a strange cry, clearly not believing it. His cultivation had risen significantly, and for some reason, the mountain ascension formula that Wang Chong gave him was exceptionally suited for him. It was as though it was tailor-made for him. It was precisely because of this that his confidence soared, and why so many disciples of the aristocratic families surrounded him and followed his lead. Yet, Wang Chong said that he might not be able to enter the Kunwa training camp. There was no way Wei Hao would believe it. Is that so? Do you think that the path of martial arts is just a clash of strength? You might be strong, but your movement technique is lacking and you aren't agile enough. You might be able to deal with ordinary people, but against true experts, they will be able to see through your flaws in just a few moves. Most of the students in the Kunwa training camp come from ordinary families, and they don't have the same background as you and me. However, this is precisely the reason why they have to put in so much more effort and hardship than you and me. Besides, the Kunwa training camp targets commoners. However, this is also the reason why the competition they face is far more intense than you and I can imagine. Those who are able to obtain the qualifications to enter the Kunwa training camp have all emerged from thousands of people or through intense competition among their respective clans. These people are the cream of the crop. Just based on how they were able to stand out from so many people. Do you think that they can't see through your flaws? Wang Chong's words moved the crowd. Mayasame Ayaka didn't expect the Kunwa training camp to have so many tricks up its sleeves. On the other hand, Li Zhuxin's eyes were filled with astonishment. It wasn't surprising for the commoners to compete intensely with one another, but given that Wang Chong was born into a family of ministers and generals, it was rare for him to know of such a thing. It can't be. On the other hand, Wei Hao didn't think too much about it. That's too exaggerated. Wang Chong didn't explain much. Given his capability, he could choose any of the 3 great training camps. The reason why he chose the Kunwa training camp wasn't because he was impulsive or because he was bored of it. Rather, it was out of deep consideration. Shenwei and Longwei were renowned and powerful training camps, and the people in them were either influential or influential clans. However, it would be proven in the future that Kunwu was the place with the most experts and talents. In the future, more than 90% of the rising generals of the Tang dynasty would come from here. This wouldn't change just because he changed the course of history. The children of the poor matured early. The nature of the Kunwa training camp made it the most outstanding among the 3 great training camps. What Wang Chong said to Wei Hao just now wasn't fabricated. It was the correct evaluation of the students of the Kunwa training camp in the future. These people had no background and limited resources. The only thing they could rely on was their hard work. Wei Hao's hard work was already considered to be very hardworking compared to his peers. But compared to these people, It was nothing. There were plenty of people who were crazier and more hardworking than him when it came to cultivation. What these people lacked wasn't aptitude, wisdom, or hard work, but cultivation resources. Thus, once they obtained sufficient resources in the Kunwa training camp, the instantaneous burst of energy would be astonishing. A single tree can't make a forest. If Wang Chong wanted to change the fate of the empire and wanted to find like-minded friends and subordinates, this was the best place. In any case, you have to remember this. If you meet someone who specializes in attacking your right lower back, use the Tiger Coiling Mountain and Dragon Coiling Mountain of the Mountain Coiling Force. Left Tiger, right Dragon. Remember this, and you won't fail miserably. Wang Chong came back to his senses and said, "Got it." Wei Hao's face was full of lingering fear. Although he didn't dare to believe it, he knew that Wang Chong would never lie to him about this serious matter. Although there was still some distance to the Kunwa training camp, Wei Hao had begun to feel that this place was even more difficult to enter than the Shunwei and Longwei camps. Wang Chong had made it so clear. If he didn't be careful, he would really be an idiot. Also, when you get up the mountain, take a closer look. There's an instructor with a face full of wrinkles and a very fat body. Don't care about anything else, just find him. It'll be good for you in the future. Wang Chong said. The Kunwa training camp was divided into groups. Each group had a different instructor. Although it was to teach basic martial arts and provide guidance, it would be very useful in the future. The instructor Wang Chong mentioned was the best instructor in cross-training in the Kunwa training camp. He was very suitable for Wei Hao's mountain coiling force. The students taught by this instructor would be the valiant generals who would charge and break through enemy lines in the future. On the battlefield in the future, this instructor and the students he taught would be like thunder in the ears of the people. But now, because of his big belly, there were still many people paying attention to him. Many people were unwilling to join him and missed out on a lot of opportunities. If nothing unexpected happened, this instructor would be promoted to a higher rank in 3 years. Basically, he would not be able to teach any students anymore. If Wei Hao wanted to develop properly, this was the best opportunity. The future had changed. Wang Chong didn't know which group he was in now. He could only remind him in advance. Yes, Wang Chong. Don't worry. I understand. Seeing the seriousness in Wang Chong's words, Wei Hao's expression turned grim. This was a tacit understanding formed over a long period of time. Zhao Jingdian, follow me. Wang Chong turned around and faced Zhao Jingdian. They were good brothers for life. There was no need for Zhao Jingdian to find a special instructor. He was the best instructor for Wei Hao. Skongzi, Zhao Jingdian respectfully agreed without even thinking about it. Wang Chong was the son of Duke Jiao, the future successor of the Wang clan. Zhao Jingdian's grandfather had followed the Wang clan. In his heart, Zhao Jingdian had long treated Wang Chong as his future master. Dida. Chapter 188. Gongzi, this is as far as we can send you. After traveling several li toward the Kunwa training camp, Li Zhuxin and Mayasame Ayaka came to a halt. Their complexions weren't too good. Li Zhuxin's complexion was still fine, but Mayasame Ayaka's was pale. There are too many experts on this mountain. Putting aside the true martial realm experts, there are quite a few profound martial realm experts as well. Ayaka and I won't be heading over. Their cultivation was far higher than Wang Chong, Wei Hao, Zhao Jingdian, and the others, so the pressure they felt was much greater. Wang Chong and the others were still fine, but the pressure seemed to be directed at them. In the entire Kunwa training camp, countless experts were gathered together, emanating intense hostility. This made Li Zhuxin, Mayasame Ayaka, and the others feel terrible. Why don't I feel anything? Wei Hao looked to his left and right in astonishment. It's fine, you two can go first. Wang Chong raised his hand to stop Wei Hao before turning to Li Zhuxin and Mayasame Ayaka. The words of the duo reminded Wang Chong of something. On the first day, the 3 great training camps had intentionally prevented the various clans from bringing their servants and personal experts into the training camp. There were top-notch experts in the 3 great training camps, and they were able to discern the difference in auras from afar. If Wang Chong's guess was right, Li Zhuxin and the others should have been suppressed by this technique. To be able to gather all the Imperial Army members in the training camp and fuse their auras into a single mountain, it was likely that they were experts from the royal family. To possess such a technique, it was almost certain that they were experts from the royal family. With such experts around, it was impossible for Li Zhuxin, Mayasame Ayaka, and the others to follow them in. Mayasame Ayaka, help me keep an eye on my cousin. If anyone tries to harm him, get rid of them discreetly. Help him until he is safely out to sea. Mr. Li, help me send Zhang Monyan off. Since the 3 great training camps needed these 2 top-notch experts for the time being, Wang Chong decided to send them out. Yes, Gongzi. The 2 of them quickly turned their steeds around and left together with Shen Hai, Meng Long, and the others. Only Wang Chong, Zhao Jingdian, Wei Hao, and the others were left to attack the Kunwa training camp. At the foot of the mountain, several huge tents were erected. Above the tents, military flags were fluttering in the wind. The words Kunwuts were written on the flags, completely in the style of a military camp. Wang Chong, Wei Hao, Zhao Jingdian, and a few other scions handed in their tokens to participate in the Kunwa training camp, and they successfully passed the test, heading up the mountain. The Kunwa training camp had chosen the highest mountains within a radius of nearly 100 miles. Walking on such mountains, everyone would feel as small as an ant. From the foot of the mountain to the peak, there were countless tents, layer by layer, like a flight of stairs. Around these tents, there were black-armored heavy-tier experts standing guard. There were already many people on the mountain. Wang Chong led the pony up the mountain. Weird, why are there so many scions here? Looking at the mountain, Wang Chong suddenly frowned. The Kunwa training camp was filled with commoners. However, for some reason Wang Chong noticed that there were quite a few scions on the mountain. They were dressed in luxurious clothes, and with a single look, it was clear that they weren't from ordinary families. Furthermore, there were quite a few of them. Logically speaking, these scions should be at Shunwei and Longwei. Why would they appear here? Could it be that it was caused by him changing his fate? Wang Chong was perplexed. Before Wei Hao could say anything, the scions of the aristocratic families beside him wanted to say something but hesitated. They all had strange expressions on their faces. Gongzi, do you really not know? One of the scions asked with a perplexed expression. What do you mean? Wang Chong was even more perplexed. The situation in the Kunwa training camp was obviously different from what he remembered. For Wang Chong, this was something that he should pay attention to. Wang Chong was just asking casually. He didn't expect Wei Hao and the others to answer him. Unexpectedly, Wei Hao didn't say anything, but his followers seemed to know the answer. Wang Chong, it seems that you really don't care about what's going on outside the window. Let me ask you, of the 3 major training camps, Shunwei, Longwei, and Kunwo, do you know which one is the most popular? Wei Hao couldn't help but laugh when he heard Wang Chong's question. Of course it's Shunwei and Longwei. What else is there to ask? Wang Chong asked in surprise. Could there be some problem here? You really don't know. Let me tell you, the most popular one is not Shunwei or Longwei, but Kunwo. How is that possible? Wang Chong was completely dumbfounded. What was going on? Wei Hao had confused him. But judging from Wei Hao's expression, it didn't seem like he was lying. This made Wang Chong even more confused. But Wang Chong was surprised. Could it be that time and space had changed, and everything was different from before? Gongzi doesn't know? It's all because of you. One of the scions finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Because of me? Wang Chong was dumbfounded. He couldn't react at all. Don't say anymore. He really doesn't know anything. As Wei Hao spoke, he turned around to look at Wang Chong with a sinister smile. Wang Chong, you're probably the only one who doesn't know about this matter. Do you know who everyone is most concerned about in regards to the 3 major training camps? It's none other than you. When you were still in the imperial prison, everyone was secretly trying to find out which of the 3 major training camps you would choose. I happen to know a little about it, so I helped you spread it out. Now, everyone says that you are the most popular among all the Han people in the Tang dynasty. As long as they follow you, they'll definitely live a good life under any general, and their promotion won't be too slow. I've already followed you to Kunwu. Can't you see such an obvious thing? Wei Hao smiled complacently. The Kunwu training camp is the worst among the 3 major training camps, but now it's the most popular because of you. We came to Kunwu training camp not only because of Gongzi Wei, but also because of you. If not for this reason, even if we wanted to join the Kunwu training camp, our families wouldn't have agreed, said a descendant of an aristocratic family who followed Wei Hao. So it's because of the regional commander's incident? Wang Chong fell silent. Only now did he realize that he might have underestimated the impact of this incident. It was only 2 days ago that he was released from the imperial prison. It was too close, and the lingering effect was still lingering. No wonder the 3 major training camps were affected. Although he was surprised, it might be a good thing for his plan. Strange, why are there girls in the training camp? After climbing for several hundred meters, Wei Hao suddenly shouted as if he had discovered something. Is that so? The training camp is divided into 4 camps: Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. It's not strange for there to be girls here. They should be from the Vermilion Bird camp. Wang Chong smiled. Although he didn't know much about them, he knew that Shunwei, Longwei, and Kunwu training camps were divided into 4 smaller camps: Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. Moreover, it was different from the past. The 3 great training camps were recruiting girls. This was a pioneering move. That was why it attracted so much attention. Wang Chong wasn't surprised by Wei Hao's words at all. In the Kunwu training camp, the tents blocked Wang Chong's view, so he had to take a detour. However, upon seeing the few girls that Wei Hao spoke of, Wang Chong's eyes narrowed and his expression warped, as though he was pricked by a needle. Wei Hao, Zhao Jingdian, don't speak. Lower your head and walk away. Lowering his head, Wang Chong pulled Zhao Jingdian along with him and walked down the mountain without turning back. Zhao Jingdian trusted Wang Chong's words, so he immediately turned around and left. However, Wei Hao was different. His confidence had soared, and there was nothing to be afraid of in the training camp. It wasn't as if he could eat anyone. Wang Chong, why are you running? As Wei Hao spoke, he walked towards a few beautiful figures standing by the side of the road, muttering, I'm going to kill them. He muttered, look, they seem to be waiting for someone. At this moment, the snow-white ears of one of the ladies twitched. As though she had heard something, she abruptly turned her head around. Before Wang Chong could walk half a meter away, he heard a sharp reprimand from the side of the mountain. Wang Chong, how dare you run? HM? Wang Chong, you two know each other? Wei Hao's eyes lit up. His interest was piqued. Leaving his 2 followers behind, he jogged toward the few beautiful and valiant-looking women in white by the side of the road. Bastard! Wei Hao, that bastard! He can't move at the sight of women. Wang Chong also heard the commotion behind him and cursed in his heart. That fool, youngster Wei, had a bad habit ever since he was young. He couldn't move at the sight of beautiful women. It wasn't that he had any ill intentions, but he just couldn't resist the temptation of beautiful women. Guanjian, you brat, you should know where you're at as well. Can't you see the aura of a queen exuding from those ladies? And you're even running toward them. Wang Chong, you're still trying to run? Don't blame us for being impolite. All of a sudden, that voice sounded for the second time. It was as cold as ice, and there was a hint of warning in it. From afar, Wei Hao's voice could be heard. Sisters, so you're waiting for Wang Chong. Call me Wei Hao. I'll... At the side of the mountain, a shrill cry rang out, followed by an earth-shattering boom. At this moment, the entire mountain seemed to tremble violently, and dust billowed into the sky. The commotion at the side of the mountain instantly attracted the attention of countless people. Many pairs of eyes looked over from all directions. Wang Chong abruptly turned around, only to see a valiant figure standing at the side of the mountain. Her hair was fluttering in the wind, and her eyes were cold. She was glaring at him coldly, and there was a strong warning in her eyes. On the other hand, Wei Hao, who had cultivated the mountain ascension formula and had just reached Origin Energy Tier 7, was currently in the midst of a surge in his strength and confidence. As though a toad struck by lightning, His limbs were spread wide open as he was stepped firmly beneath her feet. The new mountain ascension formula that Wang Chong had imparted to him made it so that there were few who could match him in the same cultivation realm. Yet, under this lady's slender legs, he couldn't even withstand a single kick. Marchioness. Chapter 189. Wang Chong, if you take another step forward, there will be one less fatty in this world. The valiant figure said coldly as she exerted a little more force on her leg, and Wei Hao immediately started screaming. Wang Chong, save me. No matter how slow Wei Hao's reaction was, he could tell that these valiant beauties were here for Wang Chong. Every single one of them was beautiful, but who knew how they could possess such strength? Wei Hao's origin energy tier 7 cultivation coupled with his coiling might made it impossible for him to move at all. He tried exerting his strength a few times, but he ended up being pinned to the ground like a toad. The disparity in strength was simply too great. He didn't stand a chance at all. It was no wonder why Wang Chong turned around and left without saying a single word upon seeing the beautiful lady. He regretted not listening to him. At this moment, Wei Hao was lying on the ground like a toad. His intestines were green with regret. The other party had grasped the relationship between Wang Chong and Wei Hao, so Wang Chong could only turn his head around. His body stiffened, he slowly made his way up the mountain. It was a short distance, but to Wang Chong, it felt as long as 1,000,000 li. Before Wang Chong could say anything, the other two valiant beauties standing by the side of the road couldn't help but burst into laughter upon seeing Wang Chong's stiff body. Marchioness E. Wang Chong looked at the young lady who seemed to be around 18 to 19 years old and called out softly. Wei Hao, who was still struggling on the ground a moment ago, suddenly felt as though he was struck by lightning. His face paled and great fear surfaced in his eyes. Marchioness E? You said that she's the Marchioness E who is together with your cousin? Wei Hao suddenly exclaimed with an uneasy expression. Didn't I say that you shouldn't go? You just wouldn't listen. Wang Chong grumbled. How would I know that you're talking about this demoness? Damn fatty, what are you saying? Who's the demoness? If your tongue is too long, you won't live long. Do you want to die? A very uncomfortable voice threatened. Don't. Big sis, that's not what I meant. I'm not talking about you. Before Wei Hao could finish his words, he suddenly let out a strange cry and was kicked into the air like a huge cannonball. Young Master Wei, young Master Wei, little Duke, young Duke. The expressions of Wei Hao's lackeys changed drastically. They ran over as if their butts were on fire. What are you doing? Zhao Jingdian felt an immense threat from the tyrannical woman before him, and he immediately moved to stand in front of Wang Chong. Do you have the right to speak here? Even Wang Chong was unable to react in time. Zhao Jingdian was sent flying several dozen zhang away at a speed that was beyond Fei's imagination. Before this frosty woman, Zhao Jingdian was powerless to resist. However, Zhao Jingdian came from a prestigious clan after all. Even though his cultivation was lacking, he was able to react swiftly. After being sent flying several dozen zhang, he twisted his body in midair and forcefully stabilized his body. Peng, he landed on the ground and staggered a few steps back, but he didn't fall. I didn't expect you to be capable. The frosty woman finally turned her head and glanced straight at Zhao Jingdian. Zhao Jingdian wasn't one to back down. After taking 2 steps forward, he immediately stopped and a trickle of blood seeped out from the corner of his lips. Clearly, he was injured from that palm strike. He wasn't as unharmed as he looked on the surface. Jingdian, stop. Seeing that Zhao Jingdian was still unwilling to back down and was about to make a move, Wang Chong hurriedly stopped him. Even though the woman before him looked young, her strength was on par with his second sister, Wang Zhuyan. If one thought that she was weak because she was a woman, then they were gravely mistaken. The kick that Wei Hao suffered and the palm that Zhao Jingdian suffered was already a sign of her going easy on them. Otherwise, if she were to use her full strength, it would be a miracle if the both of them were still standing. Wei Hao isn't injured, Wang Chong said. What? Zhao Jingdian was taken aback. Turning around, he saw 3 figures heading up the mountain. Wang Chong, I remember now. The examination for the training camp is more important. I won't be accompanying you then. You two can chat first. Wei Hao's voice sounded from afar. You must be joking. That woman was Marchioness Yi, the demoness who often hung out with Wang Chong's second sister. She was a true vicious person. Even though Wei Hao had never met her before, he had heard of her glorious deeds from Wang Chong. If only he knew that it was her, he wouldn't have come to the training camp today. This time, he had bumped into the muzzle of her gun. He had eyes but failed to see. Gongzi, do we need to be so afraid of her? Wei Hao's two lackeys were indignant. Hey, what do you know? It's not that I'm not loyal. There are a few people in Sijio City that you can't afford to offend. One of them is his second sister, and the other is that Marchioness Yi. Even if it's here, if I were anywhere else, I would still run away the moment I hear that it's them. Wei Hao ran away boldly and spoke with confidence. Wei Hao was well aware of how vicious Wang Chong's second sister was. Back then, when Wang Chong was being taught a lesson by his second sister, he still wanted to help him out of loyalty. In the end, he ended up being taught a lesson by that person. Before that person, the title of Duke of Wei was useless. Birds of a feather flock together. How could someone who could get along well with Wang Chong's second sister be any ordinary person? That person was one of the few who could knead Wang Chong like a ball of dough, just like Wang Chong's second sister. If he didn't run away now, he would really be a fool. Wang Chong, I'm willing to climb a mountain of swords and dive into a sea of flames with you. You better pray for yourself on this matter. Wei Hao observed a moment of silence for Wang Chong before running even faster. Looks like you've made a bad friend. Marchioness Yi said coldly. Behind her, the two valiant ladies laughed even louder. It could be said that they had watched Wang Chong grow up together with his second sister. Looking at Wang Chong and his scoundrel friends, they couldn't help but find it hilarious. That's right. What a disloyal fellow. Wang Chong nodded his head obediently. If only I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have saved him. Seeing Wang Chong's good attitude, Marchioness Yi harumphed coldly and let the matter rest. Wang Chong, you've grown capable now. You don't even have any respect for us anymore. Marchioness Yi suddenly said in dissatisfaction. Big sisters, what are you saying? Wang Chong cried out in indignation. He was 15 this year, and the youngest among them was already 19. They were at least 4 years older than him. It wasn't wrong for him to call them big sisters. You still refuse to admit it? Let me ask you, why didn't you come over when I called you over? Marchioness Yi's face was as cold as ice. Aren't I here now? He, that's not what your big sister Yi is talking about. Think about it carefully. Did you stand Marchioness Yi up when she invited you over? Seeing Wang Chong's awkward expression, the two valiant ladies by the side burst into laughter. Stood me up? Wang Chong was taken aback. This time, it wasn't an act. Wang Chong was truly confused. He didn't remember such a thing happening. He had been hiding from her all this while, not even meeting her. If such a thing really happened, there was no way he wouldn't remember it. Do you need me to remind you? 3 months ago, I had your second sister, Wang Zhuyen, invite you over. Marchioness Yi placed her hands on her waist and reminded him, Well, my second sister said that she would bring me to a place to meet some people. So it's you guys. Wang Chong finally recalled what was going on. However, it was precisely because he had figured it out that he was even more shocked. He finally understood why Marchioness Yi was waiting for him along the way. 3 months ago, during Wang Chong's grandfather's birthday, his second sister acted mysteriously, saying that she would bring him to meet some people after the event. But due to the large number of guests that day, the matter was left unsettled. Back then, Wang Chong was perplexed. In the end, it turned out that Marchioness Yi and the others were the ones who invited him over. Yet, his second sister must have forgotten to tell them about it. Marchioness Yi must have thought that he stood her up by not replying to her. It was no wonder why she would bring her men to block the Kunwa training camp. Coming to a realization, Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle bitterly inside. How could I dare? Isn't that my grandfather's birthday? With a bitter smile, Wang Chong hurriedly recounted the entire matter. Seeing Wang Chang's reaction, the two valiant ladies behind Marchioness Yi couldn't help but chuckle. "All right, Sister Yi, stop teasing him. What are you talking about? I think it's fun. Zhu Yan has such a fun younger brother at home, but she doesn't bring him out to play." But Wang Chong could only fall silent. Those who could hang out with second sister and get along well with each other were definitely not normal women. It was impossible for him to defeat them. None of these women were weaklings. At the very least, they were all at true martial realm. If he were to charge forward and use force on them, Wei Hao and Zhao Jingdian would be the best outcome. Besides, a gentleman doesn't fight with a lady. Even if he won, it wouldn't be an honorable victory. Zhao Jingdian's complexion was also bizarre as he listened to the conversation. Wang Chong had stirred up many storms in the royal court, and he was a highly regarded existence in the empire. However, in front of these crazy women, he was completely unable to display it. It was as if he was being restrained. This was also the first time he was seeing the women in Wang Chong's life. At least you're sensible. I won't tease you anymore." Marchioness Yi retracted her slender right leg and sheathed the whip on her waist. Her posture was valiant, reminiscent of a heroine. "I'm here to warn you. In the capital, the Black Qilin, Zhou has already announced that the 3 great training camps will be opening. As soon as you enter the training camps, I'll teach you a lesson. You should know what kind of person Zhou is. Be careful. He probably wouldn't dare to cause trouble in the training camps, but it's hard to say the same outside. Besides, it's hard to say if he doesn't do anything." Marchioness Yi warned. Zhou. Upon hearing that name, Wang Chong's face immediately warped. Zhou? Who is Zhou? Zhao Jingdian walked over and asked in astonishment. Judging from the expressions of these people, Zhou seemed to be a formidable figure. However, Zhao Jingdian had never heard of him before. "I'll tell you later." Wang Chong stopped Zhao Jingdian. Looking at Marchioness Yi before him, a grave expression flashed across his eyes. "Why does Zhou want to deal with me? I don't think there's any grudge between us, right?" You've forgotten. Imperial Censor Zhou Jie is his second uncle. 3 months ago, during the royal court gathering, Zhou Jie was publicly slapped by the old Imperial Censor He Tai several times because of you. He had lost all his face in front of so many officials. I heard that when Zhou Jie returned, he nearly committed suicide. His father passed away early, and Zhou Jie has been treating him well ever since he was young. Do you think that he wouldn't teach you a lesson if you're Zhou? Chapter 190. After saying those words, Marchioness Yi left. Only Wang Chong was left in deep thought. "Young master, who is that Zhou? Zhao Jingdian asked. He couldn't understand what Zhou was talking about. He only felt that Zhou was formidable, but he couldn't understand why. Zhou is the head of the capital's 9 gongzi, of the same generation as my second brother. He crossed blows with my second brother before, and they ended in a draw." Wang Chong said. Zhao Jingdian couldn't help but exclaim. Even though he didn't know who Zhou was, Wang Chong's second brother, Wang Bei, did. In the Wang clan, Wang Bei was once viewed as one of the most likely candidates to inherit Duke Jiu's legacy. Be it in terms of talent or martial arts, Wang Chong's second brother was an outstanding candidate. In the capital, Wang Bei's name resounded like thunder. Even the Yao clan's gongzi, Yao Feng, was taught a lesson by him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have vented his anger on Wang Chong, sending a hoodlum, Ma Zhou, to frame him. Wang Bei was an existence who could do whatever he wanted in the capital, and it was publicly acknowledged that he had a bright future ahead of him. Regardless of whether it was the scions of nobles, or prestigious clans, no one dared to provoke him. If he didn't suffer from the berserker syndrome, Wang Chong lowered his head silently. He knew far more about Zhou than what he had told Zhao Jingdian. Zhou might look honest, but he was actually a vicious person. Furthermore, he possessed incredible talent and strength. Second sister Wang Zhuyan and Marchioness Yi were already extremely powerful in the capital. But compared to Zhou, they were still lacking. They weren't on the same level. Not only so, Even though Zhou Zhang didn't seem to have any background, there were rumors that he had been adopted by King Qi. Zhou Zhang had never admitted to this matter, but he didn't deny it either. However, there was no doubt that Zhou Zhang could enter the King Qi residence freely. On top of that, King Qi treated him exceptionally well. At the very least, Zhou Zhang's martial arts were imparted to him by King Qi. If not for that, given Marchioness Yi's background, she wouldn't have been so fearful of him. Someone who was on par with his second brother, Wang Bei, was definitely no ordinary person. By the way, young master, where did that girl come from? Marquis? How old was she to be conferred the title of Marquis? Does our Tang dynasty have such a young marquis? And it's a woman? Zhao Jingdian rubbed his chest where Marchioness Yi had injured him. Jingdian, you weren't in the capital before, so you don't know. This is little Marchioness Yi, the daughter of Marchioness Yi. Among the nobles, Marchioness Yi was the only female marquis, and she was the only one whose title could be inherited. Back then, great ancestor Gao had decreed that as long as the Tang dynasty existed, Marchioness Yi's position would be passed down from generation to generation. He also passed down the alchemy book Iron Voucher as proof. Thus, even though she's little Marchioness Yi, everyone still calls her Marchioness Yi, because her position was almost set in stone. From the moment she was born, she was destined. Wang Chong smiled. In the Tang dynasty, the hereditary titles were basically all at the level of a duke. Furthermore, they were the descendants of those who followed great ancestor Gao to establish the Tang dynasty. Nobles were not qualified to be hereditary. In the Tang dynasty, Marchioness Yi was the only one who could inherit the title of marquis. I see. Zhao Jingdian nodded in realization. Wang Chong smiled and didn't say anything else. Wang Chong didn't expect Marchioness Yi to appear in the Kunwa training camp. At the very least, it didn't happen in his previous life. In this life, many things had begun to change. But no matter what, Marchioness Yi joining the Kunwa training camp was definitely beneficial to him. Furthermore, Marchioness Yi's appearance also reminded Wang Chong of something. The establishment of the 3 great training camps was a major event in the history of the Tang dynasty. He wasn't the only one who was interested in it. Experts of Marchioness Yi's caliber were also interested in it. Let's go. We'll head up the mountain to take a look. There's a limit to the number of people in the 3 great training camps. If we go too late, we might really be eliminated. Wang Chong beckoned Zhao Jingdian over, and the two of them headed up the mountain. The Kunwa training camp was astonishingly huge. Based on the surface area of the mountain, it probably covered more than 100 square meters. The entire mountain was filled with tents and people. The first day was the most bustling. Let's go. Let's clear the first test first. Wang Chong said. There were many Imperial Army soldiers stationed on the mountain, and there were many primary selection tests set up in the areas guarded by the Imperial Army. To enter the Kunwa training camp, there was a basic requirement for one's cultivation and strength. This was known as the basic requirement. If one couldn't even meet the basic requirements, there was no need for him to participate in the subsequent tests. The primary selection test was divided into 3 parts. The first part was to test one's strength. One had to lift a huge boulder. Those who couldn't lift it would be filtered out. The second part was to test one's fists. In order to pass this test, one had to know a set of fist arts. This was the most basic requirement. The third part was slightly more profound, and it was a requirement for a fighter to deal with it. I just have to withstand 3 punches? Amidst the crowd, Wang Chong easily passed the first 2 tests and stood before the last examiner. Yes. As long as you can dodge 3 punches from me, you will be able to pass this test. The man who spoke was in his 20s. His face was expressionless, and he didn't seem to be an Imperial Army soldier. Instead, he seemed to be someone hired by the royal court to be in charge of this test. I understand. Wang Chong smiled. This test was to test one's agility. I'm ready. The moment the man spoke, he suddenly punched out. Boom. Raging winds howled. At the instant the man punched out, a metal fist appeared before him. It was just a hair's breadth away from his face. The surroundings were silent. Everyone stared at Wang Chong, dumbfounded. On the other hand, the man's face was pale, and his expression was incredibly awful. Please go ahead. You have passed the primary selection test. There are no more questions. Please proceed up the mountain. With a reddened face, the man bowed and obediently retreated to the side. Thank you for going easy on me. Wang Chong flung his robe, and with a smile, he walked out of the crowd. If it was in the past, it would have been difficult for him to clear a test of this level. At the very least, he would have had to spend some time on it. However, that was then and this was now. After several months of hard work, this primary selection test was no longer difficult for him. Even though Wang Chong hadn't cultivated any speed-type or agility-type cultivation technique, his serpentine dragon root bone granted him speed, endurance, reflexes, and agility far surpassing that of an ordinary human. With just the speed of his movements, he could easily clear a test of this level. Turning around, Zhang Xian saw that Zhao Jingdian was still queuing up for the test. Wang Chong glanced at him, and without any hesitation, he headed up the mountain. Now that he had cleared the primary selection test, the next step was the most important one: the selection of instructors. There was a limit to the number of people who could enter the Kunwa training camp. At the peak of the mountain, the instructors stationed by the royal court held the life and death of everyone. Every instructor could only take in a certain number of students, and once they reached their quota, they wouldn't accept any more. By the time all of the instructors were filled, the recruitment for this batch of Kunwa training camp would be over. There was a certain technique to joining the Kunwa training camp. Most people would simply pick an instructor and head up the mountain. Little did they know that the selection of instructors was the most important part of the Kunwa training camp, as well as the most crucial part. Different instructors had different styles. Some specialized in charging through enemy lines, some specialized in killing on the battlefield, some specialized in one-on-one combat, and some specialized in cavalry charging. Many people didn't know that the instructors of the 3 great training camps were elites handpicked from the various battlefields, and they possessed rich combat experience. It was only many years later, when certain things were revealed, that the students of the 3 great training camps finally understood the significance of these instructors. Choosing the right examiner would be as beneficial to one's future as a top-notch cultivation technique. This was also the reason why Wang Chong asked Wei Hao to look for the fat instructor. Wei Hao's mountain ascension force, coupled with the fat instructor's extremely ferocious charging through enemy lines, would be able to unleash the greatest power. Wang Chong was also looking for an instructor that was suitable for him. The Kunwa training camp is already different from what I remember. I wonder if that instructor is still around. Wang Chong thought to himself. There was actually a knack for choosing an instructor. There were all kinds of instructors in the 3 great training camps. However, the instructor Wang Chong was looking for was a very special one. He didn't teach charging through enemy lines, nor did he teach invincibility of cavalry, nor did he teach physical combat. This instructor taught the highest level of art of commanding. In other words, this instructor was the hidden hero among all the instructors. Other than Wang Chong, there was probably no one on the mountain who knew of this. In Wang Chong's impression, this instructor was rather low-key. Moreover, he would only teach for 3 years. After 3 years, there would no longer be anyone teaching this type of art in the Kunwa training camp. When that instructor's identity was exposed, many people in the Kunwa training camp regretted it bitterly. However, despite keeping a low profile, it was not easy to join this instructor's team. Among all the instructors, this instructor had the highest requirements when it came to recruiting students. Many students who passed the test of other instructors were rejected by him. This was also considered a hidden requirement. However, the reason why Wang Chong wanted to join his team was not because of the art of commanding. It was because among all the instructors in the Kunwa training camp, this instructor had the highest authority. In the 3 great training camps, there were a few lost skills that could only be learned through him. Not only that, the 3 great training camps had strict rules. Once you joined the camp, you had to attend all the training, morning exercises, and homework. This was the same for all the instructors. For others, this rule might not mean much. However, Wang Chong was different. The difference was that neither the great yin-yang heaven creation art nor the art of god and demon obliteration could be taught here. Wang Chong's level had long surpassed this level. Wang Chong didn't want to be restricted too much. Among all the instructors, only that instructor was the most lax. As long as one could pass his test, there was no need to attend morning exercises, training, or daily homework. There were no restrictions at all. Chapter 191. There were many people on the mountain, including the examinees and the Imperial Army soldiers stationed on the mountain. It wasn't easy to find the instructor he was looking for in a short period of time. Fool, didn't you hear what I said? Just as he was searching for the hidden instructor, Wang Chong suddenly heard a low and tyrannical voice coming from the crowd. But Gongzi, this is my only chance. Wang Chong heard another person pleading bitterly. I don't care if this is your only chance or not. Don't forget, your father is my father's subordinate. If you dare to disobey me, your father can just wait to go home and farm. By then, your entire family can just wait to starve. That fellow is very strong. You had better remember this. No matter what, even if you die, you have to severely injure him. I know your capabilities. You can definitely do it. The voice that Wang Chong heard previously threatened fiercely. Bullying the weak again. It's one thing if it's anywhere else, but you dare to do it in the 3 great training camps? You sure are gutsy. Wang Chong sneered coldly. He had already understood what was going on. He had long heard that some people in the 3 great training camps would make use of their family's influence to force others to do something during the instructor's examination so as to gain an unfair advantage for themselves. As their methods were discreet and didn't break the rules, not even the instructors could do anything about it. However, this was the first time Wang Chong had encountered such a thing since he entered the Kunwa training camp. With a thought, Wang Chong quickly turned around and walked toward the source of the voice. Kunwa training camp was filled with people, but not many noticed them. Through the crowd, Wang Chong saw 3 proud figures standing there. Standing before them was a teenager dressed in simple clothes. He was kneeling on the ground, hugging one of the legs of one of the 3 and begging bitterly. He seemed to be filled with despair. At first glance, Wang Chong didn't pay much attention to him. However, when he saw the face, Wang Chong was stunned. How is it him? Wang Chong stood there in a daze, suddenly recognizing who these people were. In the future, the Kunwa training camp would definitely be full of talented generals. The illustrious generals of the Tang dynasty would definitely dazzle the starry sky and illuminate the night sky of the Tang dynasty for a long time. This was the most glorious period of the Tang dynasty, and it would also be the last glorious period. When this light had illuminated the heavens, Wang Chong had still been one of the unsung commoners. Therefore, Wang Chong and them actually missed each other. The 2 sides did not have much interaction. In their era, he was still a nobody, but in his era, they had already fallen. This was the deepest regret in Wang Chong's heart. As the last Grand Marshal of the Tang dynasty, he did not have a capable general who could take charge of an area. This had always been a deep pain in Wang Chong's heart. It was precisely because of this that Wang Chong was finally unable to do it alone. He had been silently holding on for more than 10 years, but he was still defeated and killed. If history could be changed, he would have been able to rise to fame in that era of talented generals. If there were so many generals for him to command, perhaps everything would be different. Because of this, Wang Chong had a good understanding of the talented generals who came out of the 3 major training camps, especially those from the Kunwa training camp. Among the talented generals who came out of the Kunwa training camp, there was one person who was the most special, because he was very good at surprise attacks. Among the countless talented generals of the Tang dynasty, there were very few generals with such a style. In the era when the entire Tang dynasty was in darkness and turmoil, the army he led used to make surprise attacks and breakthroughs under very unfavorable circumstances, creating opportunities for the army. In that era, many people had high hopes for him. But this person was like a comet. After a short burst of dazzling brilliance, he fell in a hurry. His weak martial arts became the fatal cause of his death. And an inappropriate order to break through became the direct cause of his death. And when it came down to it, it was because he had followed an inappropriate master. Regarding this matter, countless people sighed and lamented over it. Sun Jiming. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind as he looked at the kneeling examinee. To be able to forcefully order Sun Jiming to inflict heavy damage on a potential competitor to pave the way for him, this person should be Deng Mingxin. In other words, the person who would cause Sun Jiming's death in the future. To think that it would be them. It was one thing if Wang Chong didn't know about it, but if he didn't know, he couldn't just ignore it. If there were no accidents, this Sun Jiming would have failed the examination in the first batch due to Deng Mingxin. Most probably, it would only be the second batch that he entered the Kunwa training camp, and that would be half a year later. Even though it was just a difference of half a year, it could be a qualitative difference for a person. Many of the instructors who appeared in the first batch stopped teaching or guiding students in the second batch. Some of them were promoted, while others were completely focused on the first batch, unwilling to guide any more students. Furthermore, the first batch received a huge amount of attention and resources after the opening of the 3 great training camps. To those who truly wanted to enter the Kunwa training camp, the slightest difference could lead to a huge error. Not to mention, it would delay half a year of cultivation. Enough. Get up. As these thoughts flashed across Wang Chong's mind, a glint flashed across his eyes, and he immediately strode over. Sun Jiming, get up. There's no need to beg him. You're a man, so why should you be threatened by such a vile person? Wang Chong walked over, grabbed Sun Jiming's arm, and pulled him up from the ground. Sun Jiming stared blankly at the young man who had appeared out of nowhere. He had never seen this person before, and he couldn't understand why the other party would know his name. What's going on? Bastard, where did this scum come from? Why are you here to mess around? Who are you? This matter has nothing to do with you, so I advise you to stay out of our business and stay far away from here. That while Sun Jiming was still in a daze, Deng Mingxin and the others had already flown into a rage out of humiliation. The 3 of them were in the midst of teaching Sun Jiming a lesson when a tortoise suddenly appeared and interfered in their affairs. The 3 great training camps were extremely important to them, and anyone who dared to spoil their plans would be their mortal enemy. If I were you, I would leave right now. Deng Mingxin stepped forward and glared viciously at Wang Chong, not bothering to conceal his threat. Deng Mingxin, if I were you, I would scram right now. You can't afford to offend me. Wang Chong sneered coldly. Bastard, how can you speak to young Master Deng in such a manner? One of the lackeys couldn't hold himself back any longer and sent a fist flying toward Wang Chong. Ong long long. Dust billowed. No one could see how Wang Chong had made his move, but the lackey by Deng Mingxin's side was already smashed to the ground by Wang Chong's fist. The force was so great that the ground seemed to tremble for a moment. Not just Deng Mingxin, even the surrounding examinees were stunned by the sight. Only then did Sun Jiming react. He stared at Wang Chong in shock, realizing that the other party's background wasn't simple. Who in the world are you? Deng Mingxin's eyes narrowed as he flew into a rage out of humiliation. Guards, guards! Someone is fighting on the mountain, assaulting the examinees. Deng Mingxin's lackey reacted even faster and shouted toward the top of the mountain. On the first day of the training camp, anyone who dared to start a fight on the mountain would be met with the guards, and it was even possible for them to be stripped of their qualifications. Who are you? Don't you know that fighting is strictly prohibited here? The commotion on the mountain had already attracted the attention of several Imperial Army members. Like ferocious tigers descending from the mountain, they rushed over from all directions with disdain on their faces. It's him. I don't know what's wrong with him, but he suddenly attacked our men as though he had gone mad. Upon seeing the Imperial Army members arrive, one of Deng Mingxin's lackeys pointed at Wang Chong and sneered coldly. Deng Mingxin didn't say a word, but a gleeful glint flashed across his eyes. I've already told you to leave as soon as possible. But it's a pity that you didn't listen and insisted on meddling in other people's business. Deng Mingxin sneered coldly. Against a brute like Wang Chong, there was no need for him to make a move personally. As long as he played some tricks, regardless of whether Wang Chong made a move or not, he would be able to teach him a harsh lesson. Without such capabilities, how could he possibly control Sun Jiming and have him under his thumb? Is that so? I've already said that I'm not someone you can afford to offend. Wang Chong sneered coldly. Before the gazes of the crowd, before the Imperial Army members, he suddenly whipped out a token from his waist. Seeing the two simple words on the token, everyone's face paled in shock. The King of Song. This is the token of the King of Song. Exclamations of shock sounded in the surroundings. The arrogant Deng Mingxin and the others felt as though their eyes had been pricked by needles. Upon seeing the token, their faces immediately warped. I know who he is. He's Wang Chong. Heavens! He really came to the Kunwa training camp. A commotion broke out in the surroundings. Among the crowd, someone finally recognized Wang Chong's voice. And upon hearing Wang Chong's name, Deng Mingxin's heart sank to the bottom of a lake. He finally understood why the other party dared to be so nosy before him. However, it was better not to know than to not know. Deng Mingxin's heart felt heavy. So it's Wang Gongzi. Given Gongzi's reputation, it's unlikely that Gongzi made a move first. What's wrong with you all? To dare to make a move in the Kunwa training camp, do you still want to participate in the examination? Bring him away. How dare he make a move on Gongzi in the training camp? Strip him of his right to participate in the examination. That the voices of the Imperial Guards reached their ears, causing their expressions to turn ugly to the extreme. Before the crowd's eyes, the Imperial Army members were openly siding with Wang Chong. They picked up the unconscious examinee and dragged him down the mountain. Just like that, he was stripped of his right to participate in the examination. Gongzi? Beside Deng Mingxin, the follower's face was ashen and pale. Right, Gongzi, if you have the time, make a few more Wuzi steel swords. A single sword a month is too little. One of the Imperial Army members had already walked 10 zhang away when he suddenly turned around and spoke to Wang Chong passionately. In the Imperial Army, there was almost no one who didn't know of the Wuzi steel sword, regardless of whether it was internal or external. Especially after the commander of the Imperial Army bought Wang Chong's Death's Abyss, the reputation of the Wuzi steel sword had spread like wildfire in the Imperial Army. I understand. Chapter 192. Wang Chong? You're Wang Chong Gongzi. At this moment, Sun Jiming was completely dumbfounded. Wang Chong had submitted a memorial to the Holy Emperor regarding the regional commander's incident, causing him to be hated by the Hu and imprisoned in the imperial prison. Sun Jiming didn't expect that the one who would suddenly appear to help him deal with Deng Mingxin would be Wang Chong. In that instant, Sun Jiming was incomparably agitated. Wang Gongzi, I have no grudge with you, so why must you go against me? Deng Mingxin stared at Wang Chong with an awful expression. After learning of Wang Chong's identity and seeing him take out the token of the King of Song, Deng Mingxin knew that he had kicked a metal plate this time. Where's your high and mighty attitude from just now? What? Are you going to admit defeat now? Wang Chong sneered coldly as he slowly adjusted his sleeves. There's no need for you to think too much. I just want to tell you this. I'm determined to interfere in Sun Jiming's affairs. Those words left Deng Mingxin's face even uglier than the bottom of his stomach. Wang Gongzi, must you do this? Deng Mingxin took a deep breath. He knew that there was no way he could resolve this matter peacefully. Since Wang Chong insisted on interfering in Sun Jiming's affairs, he decided to throw caution to the wind. Even though my background isn't as good as yours, you shouldn't be too gleeful. I might not be able to deal with you, but there are plenty of people in the Kunwa training camp who can. The King of Song might be powerful, but he's still no match for King Qi in the royal court. Sun Jiming, think carefully. Are you going to follow me or him? You should know the consequences of offending King Qi. When the time comes, it won't be as simple as just losing your father's position. He had to get his hands on Sun Jiming, and it wasn't just because this matter concerned whether he could enter the Kunwa training camp or not. Furthermore, Sun Jiming was the only talent under his father. Even that person had said that Sun Jiming's talent was astounding, and he was someone that he should have a firm grasp over. As long as he could tame Sun Jiming, he would surely be able to achieve meteoric success in the future. Furthermore, Sun Jiming was also the reason why he had chosen to side with King Qi. It didn't matter if Wang Chong taught his lackey a lesson or made him lose face. But Sun Jiming couldn't leave. No matter what, he had to firmly grasp this person in his hands. Seeing how Deng Mingxin was still trying to threaten Sun Jiming at this point in time, Wang Chong was infuriated. If he allowed Sun Jiming to continue following Deng Mingxin, Sun Jiming's death would only be a matter of time. To think that Deng Mingxin would dare to use his clan and King Qi to suppress Sun Jiming. Wang Chong didn't mind using his illustrious family background to suppress Deng Mingxin's cautiousness. Deng Mingxin, no wonder you're so confident. It turned out that he had sided with King Qi. But do you think that relying on Prince Qi will be of any use? Wang Chong sneered coldly. Since Deng Mingxin refused to let go of Sun Jiming and even used his clan to threaten him, he couldn't be blamed for his actions. Deng Mingxin, I heard that your father is Deng Zhou, right? Tomorrow, return to the countryside with your father. Those words made Deng Mingxin's face darken. Wang Chong, stop bragging. Who do you think you're scaring? You don't have the capability. We'll find out tomorrow whether you believe me or not. Wang Chong sneered coldly. His big uncle, Wang Zhen, was an influential official in the royal court, and the king of Song had reinstated his position and returned to the royal court. As long as the two of them worked together, it would be a walk in the park to demote a minor official and have him retire early. Deng Mingxin's father, Deng Zhou, was an assistant minister in the Bureau of Personnel, wielding great authority over the life and death of officials. It was through this authority that the Deng clan was able to keep Sun Jiming's family in the palm of their hands. However, if he didn't have this identity, he would like to see what Deng Mingxin would use to threaten Sun Jiming. Sun Jiming, don't worry. I'll help you if anything happens. Just go ahead and take the examination. As for Deng Mingxin, there won't be an assistant minister Deng Zhou in the Bureau of Personnel anymore, so he won't be able to threaten you anymore. Wang Chong lightly said, his right hand patting Sun Jiming's shoulder, his expression naturally exuding an aura that could convince others. The current Wang clan had risen from the ashes, and everyone was united. Together with the king of Song and the consort Tai Jin in the palace, they were determined to protect Sun Jiming. Gongzi, thank you. Sun Jiming bowed deeply in gratitude. There was no one in the world who didn't know of Duke Jiu's name. If the Wang clan were to stand up for him, he wouldn't have to worry about his father. Bastard! Sun Jiming, don't regret this. How could Deng Mingxin not know Sun Jiming's choice? With a steely face, he flung his sleeves and stormed off. He could still say a few words if Wang Chong were to instigate Sun Jiming. But since Sun Jiming had chosen Wang Chong, there was nothing he could do about it. There was no point in staying here. Gongzi! Seeing Deng Mingxin leave, the other lackey's face darkened, and he hurriedly followed. Looking at their backs, Wang Chong chuckled inwardly. A wicked man needs another wicked man to deal with. Against someone like Deng Mingxin, Wang Chong didn't mind playing the role of the wicked man for a moment. Most of the students in Kunwa training camp were commoners or descendants of ordinary officials, so Wang Chong wouldn't make use of their status to deal with them. But if anyone tried to use their status to bully others and undermine fairness, Wang Chong wouldn't mind using his own identity to suppress them. Sun Jiming, you're quite perceptive. However, your root bone is still lacking. After today's examination, come over to my place. I'll impart a panther bone cultivation technique to you. Wang Chong said, on the path of martial arts, one had to progress from easy to difficult. It wasn't that Wang Chong wasn't willing to impart a higher root bone cultivation technique to him. Rather, Sun Jiming hadn't even reached the most basic panther bone. There was no benefit in imparting him the tiger bone. Thank you, Gongzi. Overjoyed, Sun Jiming stood up and bowed deeply. The root bone cultivation technique had always been a secret of the general clans. Sun Jiming's talent wasn't bad, but his root bone was too weak. An elder once told him that if he could make up for his weak root bone, his future would be limitless. This was also the reason why Sun Jiming was so determined to join Kunwa training camp. Sun Jiming didn't expect Wang Chong to be willing to impart the panther bone cultivation technique to him. There's no need to thank me. Also, if possible, try to learn a movement technique. Even though the steel cavalry's speed is unparalleled, they aren't omnipotent. What would happen if the steel cavalry were to be killed? Movement technique? Sun Zhiming was taken aback. He didn't expect Wang Chong to suddenly mention this. Wang Chong chuckled, not saying anything else. There were many reasons for Sun Zhiming's death. Improper orders, weak personal strength. These were all reasons. However, based on Wang Chong's experience as the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains, he could instinctively sense that Sun Zhiming had a fatal flaw. He didn't pay much attention to his movement technique. Indeed, the steel cavalry's charge was as fast as lightning. As long as one could control the horse well and become one with it, it wouldn't matter even if one didn't learn movement techniques. However, if the horse were to be killed, its short legs would immediately become a fatal obstacle. Ever since the founding of the Tang dynasty, countless talented generals had emerged from the Central Plains. There were many who accidentally fell into a tight encirclement on the battlefield, but even so, there was a high chance that they would be able to escape alive. But Sun Zhiming was different. If his horse were to be killed and he fell into a tight encirclement, his chances of survival were close to zero. He wouldn't even be able to hold out until the reinforcements arrived. The situation on the battlefield could change in an instant. Although a dense group of enemies would be a great hindrance, if one could have a good movement technique and footwork on the battlefield, a dense group of enemies could sometimes be of help to obstruct the enemy's leader and help one escape. Sun Zhiming specialized in surprise attacks. Under such circumstances, the chances of him falling into a tight encirclement was much higher than other generals. If he didn't change his habits and didn't pay attention to movement techniques, he would never be able to change his fate in the end. There were very few talented generals in the Tang dynasty, and Wang Chong didn't wish for such a talented general to meet his end in such a manner. Wang Chong didn't linger, quickly disappearing into the crowd. Many things were best left unsaid. Saying too much would only bring about trouble. Movement technique? Behind him, Sun Zhiming was still muttering to himself. He had encountered far too many inconceivable things on Wang Chong. For example, the other party actually knew that his name was Sun Zhiming and that he knew Deng Mingxin. More importantly, he even knew that Deng Mingxin's father was Assistant Minister of Revenue, Deng Zhou. Sun Zhiming couldn't believe his ears. But there was no doubt that Wang Chong was here to help him. This Gongzi is truly unfathomable. It's hard to fathom him with common sense. Sun Zhiming's heart was in turmoil. Even though he didn't know why Wang Chong would mention movement techniques to him, Sun Zhiming made a mental note of it. With such thoughts in mind, Sun Zhiming quickly roused himself and headed up the mountain. Gongzi, who is that? Zhao Jingdian walked over from the crowd and stared in Sun Zhiming's direction in astonishment. He had been here for a while now, and he thought that Sun Zhiming and Wang Chong were old acquaintances. To think that they weren't. That person will be our comrade in arms on the battlefield in the future. Wang Chong chuckled. The future had changed. Even though he didn't know where it was headed, at the very least, it should be beneficial to him. Pulling Zhao Jingdian along, Wang Chong quickly made his way up the mountain. However, Sun Zhiming's matter had reminded him that this Kunwa training camp was filled with countless future great generals. Now that he was involved, perhaps he could use the advantage of his foresight to change a few people, change a few things, preserve more talents for the Great Tang, retain a few more generals, and accumulate even more vitality. Wait here for me for a moment. With such thoughts in mind, Wang Chong headed toward the center of the crowd. Before Zhao Jingdian could react, Wang Chong had already disappeared. Standing amidst the crowd, Zhao Jingdian was at a loss as to what Wang Chong was up to. Roughly 2 hours later, Wang Chong appeared before Zhao Jingdian once more. His expression was much more relaxed than before, clearly indicating that he had gained something. Jingdian, come with me. I've found that instructor. Chapter 193. In the Kunwa training camp, several hundred zhang away from the peak, a middle-aged instructor stood motionlessly on a protruding boulder with his hands behind his back. Different from the other instructors, the crowd around this instructor was sparse. Most of the people hurriedly walked past him, not even sparing him a glance as they rushed toward the other instructors to take the test. Seeing this sight, the instructor didn't seem to mind it at all. Instead, he smiled. "Instructor, I wish to take the test." After an unknown period of time, a student suddenly walked up from the foot of the mountain and bowed respectfully. "Hey, you have to think it through. The difficulty here is much higher than the other places. In other places, you might be sparring with other examinees, but here, you have to spar with me." The instructor placed his hands behind his back and smiled. "Instructor?" The skinny student was taken aback. In the other instructors, most of the battles were between examinees. This was the first time he heard that he had to spar with an instructor. How could an examinee be a match for an instructor? Wouldn't it be impossible for him to pass the test? That's right. Not only do you have to spar with me personally. Furthermore, the number of slots available here is much lesser than the other instructors. If you were to waste your time here, the other instructors might have already filled up their slots and left. You have to think it through, okay? The instructor smiled with his eyes squinted. The skinny examinee was taken aback. This was the first time he met an instructor who was so considerate of the examinees. This was also the first time he met an instructor who forbade him from taking the test. I'm sorry, I'll try somewhere else." The examinee hurriedly lowered his head with a flushed face. After apologizing a few times, he hurriedly left. The instructor didn't get angry. Watching as the examinee left, he continued to stand on the boulder with a smile, not moving an inch. Following which, a few more examinees came to inquire, but without exception, they were all persuaded to leave. There were a few who weren't afraid of death, but they weren't even able to withstand half a blow from the instructor before they were sent flying far away. Their mouths were filled with mud, and they didn't dare to approach him anymore. For more than half an hour, there wasn't a single examinee around the instructor who had passed. "Young Master Chong, is he the one you were talking about?" Around a dozen steps away from the examinee, Zhao Jingdian looked at the instructor and frowned. "Yes." Wang Chong nodded seriously. His eyes were fixed on the instructor, and he did not move at all. "We've been standing here for a long time." But he couldn't see anything special about it. This instructor was too strong. And from the looks of it, he's not anxious at all. Zhao Jingdian said. The more he looked at the instructor, the more suspicious he became. In this Kunwa training camp, all the instructors had a certain number of examinees standing next to them, but this one was the only one without any. Of course he isn't in a hurry. We are the ones who should be anxious. If you miss this mountain, you will miss this temple. The biggest reward in the Kunwa training camp is this instructor. Wang Chong said. Zhao Jingdian was taken aback. Wang Chong's words were truly novel, and he found them rather strange. Anyway, remember this. Under this instructor's name, you will receive more benefits than the other instructors. That's all. Wang Chong said. Oh. Zhao Jingdian nodded his head. It would be much easier to understand if he spoke in another way. Wang Chong did not speak anymore. He had been observing this instructor for quite some time now. Initially, Wang Chong was worried that this instructor might have left due to his recruitment limit. But after witnessing it personally, Wang Chong knew that he was overthinking. It was much more difficult to join this special instructor who taught the art of commanding. Since the other party had taken the initiative to persuade one not to join him, it was clear that there was a problem. Furthermore, based on Wang Chong's observation, this instructor was different from the others. The other instructors had 20 to 30 slots each, but based on his previous life's memories, Wang Chong had estimated that this instructor would recruit 4 to 5 people. But looking at his calm demeanor, Wang Chong felt that he was wrong. This instructor probably did not have a quota. It was purely a matter of luck. Even if no one picked him, he would be fine. In the end, I still have to do it myself. Wang Chong's eyebrows twitched as he sighed inwardly. For this match, he had originally planned to watch other people's matches first. He wanted to let the other examinees test his strength. In the end, Wang Chong realized that he was overthinking things. This instructor was simply too powerful. The examinees who charged at him didn't even have the strength to force him to leave the boulder beneath his feet. With just a single palm strike, The battle was already over. Overwhelming strength. Fast, ruthless, and accurate. Even if Wang Chong were to stay here for a few more hours, he wouldn't be able to see anything out of the ordinary. Jing Dian watched from the side. I'll give it a try. Wang Chong adjusted his sleeves. Young Master Chong, let me go first. Let me test his skills first. Zhao Jingdian said. There's no need for that. Let me do it. If you fail, you won't stand a chance anymore. Wang Chong said calmly. With regards to this instructor, Wang Chong didn't know much about him. Not everything that happened in the Kunwa training camp would be spread around. At the very least, when Wang Chong first arrived at the Kunwa training camp, he realized that there wasn't a single examinee who passed by the side of this legendary instructor. This was completely different from Wang Chong's impression of him. The future had already changed. What if he could have tried a few more times but could only try once? That would be troublesome. At the very least, Zhao Jingdian wouldn't stand a chance anymore. Furthermore, in terms of experience, insight, and knowledge, the current Zhao Jingdian was far from being a match for him. If even he wasn't a match for him, Zhao Jingdian wouldn't stand a chance at all. This was also the reason why Wang Chong insisted on going first. I wonder if that person will appear again? A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. There was another person tied together with this instructor, but some things had changed. Wang Chong didn't know if that person would appear again. As these thoughts flashed across his mind, Wang Chong quickly walked over. Instructor, this student pays his respects. Wang Chong walked over gracefully and bowed, following the rules. After watching for so long, you are finally willing to come down? The instructor looked at Wang Chong and said. He seemed to have assessed Wang Chong twice more than the others. Upon hearing those words, Wang Chong chuckled. This instructor was much more interesting than he had imagined. Hee, I have no choice but to come down. If this goes on, I probably won't be able to see anything by nightfall. Wang Chong chuckled. He wasn't surprised that this instructor was able to see through his disguise. So, are you confident now? The instructor asked again. No. Wang Chong shook his head honestly. Then why are you here? The instructor found it strange. He looked at Wang Chong with interest. Whether I can pass or not, I have to try to know. I just want to ask, how many chances do I have in total? Interesting. I've been standing here for so long, and you're the first one to ask me this question. You're all going to enter the Kunwa training camp. Why don't you choose an easier instructor? I don't have it easy here. The instructor became more and more interested. This examinee gave him a completely different feeling from the others. Most of the others listened to his advice and experienced his strength, and most of them retreated in the face of difficulties. But this one watched for a long time and didn't say anything. Moreover, it seemed that he had to pass under his name. Heaven rewards the diligent. With great difficulty, there will naturally be great rewards. I don't believe there is no reason why the Imperial Court has so many instructors with different strengths and levels. Wang Chong said seriously, Haha, interesting. This is really interesting. The instructor laughed and looked at Wang Chong with a strange look in his eyes. I usually don't tell examinees about this kind of thing in advance. But since you're so interesting, I can tell you in advance. With me, you can have 3 chances. As long as you can defeat me or block 3 of my moves, you'll pass. 3 moves? Does it count if I dodge it? Wang Chong asked with great interest. The instructor smiled and squinted his eyes. His answer was resolute and decisive. Hearing such a straightforward answer, Wang Chong didn't feel as happy as he imagined. Instead, he became more cautious. Sometimes, the simpler something seemed, the more difficult it was. The fact that the other party was so straightforward could only mean 2 things. Firstly, he had absolute confidence in his own strength. Secondly, his movement technique and speed were definitely very fast, much faster than what most people could imagine. He was not afraid of them dodging at all. For Wang Chong, this was not good news. However, this didn't make Wang Chong give up. Instead, it aroused his fighting spirit. Instructor, I want to have a try. Wang Chong suddenly said, Go ahead. But don't blame me for not reminding you. The assessment of the Kunwa training camp has been going on for a long time. The longer you stay here with me, the lower your chances of passing with the other instructors. Once they've recruited all the examinees, you won't be able to pass even if you're very strong. The instructor said. I understand. Oh, since you insist, let's do it. The instructor smiled faintly and made a please gesture with a confident and calm expression. Clang. Wang Chong didn't stand on ceremony. He suddenly pulled out the long sword at his waist. The clear and long sound was like a dragon or a tiger, instantly attracting the attention of the examinees nearby. Wang Chong held the long sword in his hand and looked at the instructor opposite him. His expression was extremely solemn. Wang Chong would never underestimate his opponent, let alone a legendary instructor of this level. Palms, shoulders, hips, knees, ankles. Wang Chong's eyes kept sweeping across these parts. Although the instructor opposite him had hidden his strength and didn't reveal anything, Wang Chong didn't gain anything after standing next to him for more than an hour. As the world's Grand Marshal in his previous life, Wang Chong's experience and knowledge were still there. It wasn't necessary to know everything. As long as one could see something, one would be able to deduce many things. There are thick calluses on the edges of his palms. This means that his palm force is very heavy and he has a special cultivation in palm force. Usually, this kind of person wouldn't have any special attainments in swordsmanship. In addition, although he doesn't strike much and only uses one arm when he strikes, the tendons in his left shoulder will contract. In addition, his right knee will tremble and his left toe will subconsciously move outwards. This is a habit that he has cultivated over a long period of time. Although I don't know what secret art he cultivates, he would touch these parts when he strikes. There can't be too many secret arts like this. Wang Chong carefully recalled the few times that the instructor had made a move against him, and his mind was in turmoil. If that instructor knew what Wang Chong was thinking about, he would definitely be shocked. This kind of ability to deduce the general trend from small clues far surpassed the performance of Wang Chong's ability at his age. Even veterans who were used to fighting on the battlefield wouldn't be able to do this. Wang Chong's ability was too shocking. Clang! Chapter 194. Single Character Consecutive Slash. Wang Chong became one with his sword and shot out explosively, perfectly demonstrating what it meant to be as still as a virgin and as agile as a feather. With just this move, he had surpassed 90% of the examinees present. Wang Chong had already disappeared, but many of the examinees who were attracted by the humming of the sword were still staring at the spot where Wang Chong was originally standing. Interesting. On the rock, the instructor smiled, unmoving like a mountain. His expression was calm. Although the speed of Wang Chong's single-character consecutive slash was extremely fast, it still couldn't escape his discerning eyes. Wang. Raising his right hand, his sleeves trembled slightly. In a flash, just as Wang Chong pounced over with his sword, the instructor simply slashed out with his palm. This palm strike was no different from the one he had used against the other examinees. It was simple, yet it was as fast as lightning and as heavy as 1,000 caddies. There was simply nothing that could block it. However, at the next moment, something unexpected happened. Bang! Without any warning, just a few steps away from the instructor, a ball of sword light flashed. In an instant, everything turned dark, and Wang Chong disappeared without a trace. And almost at the same time, amidst the crisp humming of the sword, a ray of sword light shot out diagonally from the back of the instructor. The sword light was low, aiming straight for the instructor's lower body. When the sound rang out, it was already less than a few inches away from the instructor's right leg. With such a sudden change, the expression of the instructor, who was originally as calm as a virgin and as immovable as a mountain, instantly changed. To think that he could still change his movements so quickly while moving at an extreme speed. Just this move alone had already surpassed all the examinees before him. Bang! His sleeves trembled lightly, ruthlessly hitting the blade of Wang Chong's sword. The soft sleeves and the blade of the sword clashed, yet the sound of metal clashing rang out, as though the sleeves were made of metal. At the same time, A hand with thick calluses that looked like an eagle's claw suddenly reached out and pressed down. It was not aimed at Wang Chong's sword, but at lightning speed, it pressed down on Wang Chong's hand that was holding the sword. After standing in the Kunwa training camp for so long, this was the first time he was forced to leave the protruding rock under his feet. Wang Chong's attack was aimed at his lower body. If he didn't want his legs to be crippled, he had to leave the rock. Clang. Wang Chong's body moved along with his sword as he executed the virtuous steps. At the same time, he swung his sword like a snake coming out of its hole, brushing away the iron sleeves of the instructor. Then he raised his sword and slashed at the instructor with its single-character consecutive slash. Bang! The instructor's eyes finally revealed a dignified look. With a wave of his long sleeves, a majestic force erupted and tossed Wang Chong into the sky with earth-shattering force. Exclamations of shock sounded in the surroundings. Everyone knew that it was inconvenient to maneuver in the air. The gap between a student and an instructor was simply too huge. An instructor could crush a student with just his strength alone. Being tossed into the air meant that Wang Chong's defeat was inevitable. Young master. Zhao Jingdian, who was watching the battle from afar, couldn't help but reveal a nervous expression. This situation was clearly disadvantageous to Wang Chong. But something unexpected happened. While Wang Chong's body was being flung into the air, he abruptly descended from the sky. At the same time, his body moved along with his sword, and another swift and heavy sword slashed down toward the instructor's hands. Good. No wonder you insisted on clearing under my name. It turns out that your cultivation has already reached Origin Energy Tier 7. The instructor burst into laughter. To think that Wang Chong was still able to borrow strength from his iron sleeves despite being flung into the air. This was truly a pleasant surprise to him. Ever since the opening of the Kunwa training camp, this was the first time he had met someone who could exchange blows with him in such a manner. Facing Wang Chong's incomparably sharp sword, the instructor's aura surged, and his robes fluttered in the wind. Instead of dodging, his fingers moved as fast as lightning, dodging the sharp edge of the sword. Then he flicked his 10 fingers on the body of the sword, striking relentlessly at Wang Chong's sword. His fingers were extremely heavy. Every move he made seemed light, but in reality, they were as heavy as a mountain. Regardless of how Wang Chong slashed or sliced, the sword was unable to reach his fingers, needless to say, his body. To be able to move his fingers so nimbly, it was truly a miracle. Inconceivable. Not too far away, a spectating student muttered to himself. He was completely dumbfounded by the sight before him. Initially, he was passing by the area to try his luck with another instructor, but he didn't expect to witness such a sight. The instructor's fingers were like an invisible fortress. No matter how fast Wang Chong's sword was, no matter how fast, whether it was hacking, slashing, slicing, or slicing, he was unable to break through the barrier of the instructor's fingers. This was the first time he had seen such a miraculous martial arts technique. Around him, there were many students who were as shocked as he was. In that instant, everyone had a feeling that this unprepossessing yet amiable and approachable instructor, who had been standing on the protruding rock for half a year, was probably the most powerful instructor in the entire Kunwu training camp. How can a student fight with an instructor to this extent? What kind of sword technique is this? He's borrowing the instructor's strength to fight back. He's like a maggot attached to the bone. There's no way to get rid of him. Amidst their astonishment, many people's gazes involuntarily shifted to Wang Chong. On this mountain, most of the battles were between candidates. The strongest would be selected and the best would be admitted. However, the person in front of them was actually challenging the instructor directly. Not only that, but he was also fighting with the instructor to this extent. Wang Chong's position fluctuated between the front and the back, the left and the right. That instructor flicked his fingers continuously, and most of the power of the heavenly lightning seemed to have been dissipated by him. To many people, this was an unimaginable feat to think that Gongzi's strength has reached such a level. Zhao Jingdian's heart was in turmoil. This was the first time he had seen Wang Chong execute the single-character consecutive slash. The momentum of the sword was endless, and it was as though there was no end to it. Anyone who saw this swordsmanship would find it hard to forget, and it would leave a deep impression on them. However, Gongzi still won't be able to win. Zhao Jingdian frowned. Even though Wang Chong seemed to be doing well on the surface, Zhao Jingdian could still tell that Wang Chong's movements were erratic, and there were signs of him losing control of his movements. Furthermore, his meridians were also a little chaotic. Clearly, he was still under immense pressure from the instructor. Go. In the blink of an eye, there was an earth-shattering explosion. The instructor let out a roar, and his aura surged. His robes fluttered in the wind, and in an instant, an unstoppable surge of yuan qi erupted from his body like a tidal wave. In the air, Wang Chong was struck by this surge of origin energy, and his body trembled as he was sent flying. It was Wang Chong who reacted swiftly. Even though he was sent flying a dozen zhang away, he still executed the origin energy tier 7,000 gene descent to forcefully crash into the ground. He staggered several steps backward before stabilizing his body. Lad, your strength isn't too bad. I have been in the capital for several decades, and I have seen all kinds of martial arts. I have never seen a swordsmanship like yours before. Are you trying to create your own swordsmanship? The instructor stepped forward, and his long hair fluttered in the wind. Looking at Wang Chong, who was a dozen zhang away from him, his eyes lit up. Wang Chong chuckled. Clutching his chest with his left hand, he didn't deny it. This instructor was truly incredible. His single-character consecutive slash was able to subdue even the foreign invaders on the battlefield, but he was actually unable to deal with this instructor. After a swift exchange of blows, not only was he unable to break through the other party's defense, he was even jolted to the point where his blood and energy were in turmoil, and his stamina was greatly sapped as well. Interesting. Hearing Wang Chong's reply, the astonishment in the instructor's eyes deepened. To be able to create such a formidable swordsmanship at such a young age, it was truly inconceivable. For you to possess such talent at such a young age, it's truly astonishing. If possible, I would really like to take you under my wing. However, it's a pity that given your current strength, it's impossible for you to defeat me. Rules are rules, and I can't break them either. If you can't defeat me, you won't be able to pass the trial. You have already made up your mind? Have you thought it through? Do you still want to continue? Why not? Unexpectedly, upon hearing those words, Wang Chong chuckled. His smile was clear and brimming with confidence, as though he wasn't affected by his previous defeat at all. Hearing that, the instructor's eyebrows twitched, a little surprised. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Just now, you were the one attacking, and I haven't taken the initiative to attack yet. Furthermore, I haven't used my full strength. I know. Wang Chong chuckled. The reason why he chose to use a sword wasn't a moment of foolishness. Only by using a sword could the other party refrain from attacking, and only then could he make up for the difference in strength between the two of them. More importantly, although the previous exchange ended in his defeat, Wang Chong had already obtained what he wanted from it. 10 directional lightning fingers. 8 directional blocking force. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. If he wasn't wrong, the martial art that the instructor used was the 10 directional lightning fingers for his finger force, and then 8 directional blocking force for his palm force. These two secret arts were extremely profound and difficult to cultivate, and were high-level military secret arts that were extremely difficult to cultivate. Usually, they were for generals to cultivate, but there were very few successful cases. 10 directional lightning fingers wasn't just a finger art, it was also a type of inner strength, a technique. This martial art didn't just cultivate the fingers, but the inner strength of the entire body. The finger art was just a natural external manifestation of inner strength when it reached a certain level. 10 directional lightning fingers was both offensive and defensive. Once mastered, the fingers would be as hard as steel. On the battlefield, with the borrowed force and without weapons, one could directly pierce through the opponent's profound armor. Tearing through metal with bare hands was just a small matter. In real cultivation, the 10 fingers were like 10 sharp swords, able to pierce through metal and crack stone, and destroy everything. Furthermore, 10 directional lightning fingers covered the entire body with energy, causing the speed of one's attack and movement to be incomparably fast. Therefore, those who cultivated this secret art didn't have to worry about their finger force being dodged. On the battlefield, those who cultivated this secret art were completely invincible killing machines in the form of humans. As for 8 directional blocking force, it was his simple slash. It looked light, but it was actually extremely heavy. Those who could master these 2 secret arts at the same time, on the battlefield, would be a bloodthirsty killing god, and the most ferocious general. Wherever they went, there would be rivers of blood. Although this person tried his best to conceal himself, he was still recognized by Wang Chong. This person isn't simple. Chapter 195. Wang Chong was far more knowledgeable about the unique skills of the military than other unique skills. Since he knew that his opponent was using that 10-directional lightning finger, the next step was much easier. Boom! Wang Chong swept his feet and a cloud of dust rose into the air, instantly covering his body. This move was so sudden that even the instructor raised his eyebrows in surprise. But very quickly, in the next moment, there was a flash of light, and a figure who had become one with his sword shot out from within. Again? Is it the same move? The instructor chuckled coldly. Without dodging, he allowed Wang Chong to strike him once more. However, the situation was different this time. Wang Chong did not go around to the back of the instructor, but went straight for him. Boom, boom, boom. The sword and finger collided, creating a series of loud noises. Wang Chong's sword chi could not break through the instructor's 10-directional lightning finger. However, the situation was a little different this time. Front, top, bottom, left, right, lower. Wang Chong's attack sequence seemed to contain some kind of pattern. With a clear sword hum, Wang Chong changed his sword technique and suddenly became one with the sword. He summoned all his strength and pounced at the instructor's lower back. It's useless. The instructor smirked and suddenly turned around. His fingers moved like lightning, one hand holding the sword, the other grabbing at Wang Chong's palms. The difference in strength between the two was too great. Wang Chong's attack did not pose any threat to him at all. However, in the blink of an eye, just as the instructor's fingers were about to grab Wang Chong, something strange happened. Without any reason, the instructor's fingers suddenly stopped. Suddenly, his movements became countless times slower, as if he was out of yuan qi. It was just a small change, but the instructor's expression changed instantly. On the other side, Wang Chong seemed to have expected such a change. Wang Chong grasped the opportunity as he swung his sword. The 3-foot-long sword swept forward. Boom! A wave of powerful strength chi erupted from the instructor's body at almost the same time. The powerful force sent Wang Chong flying with his sword. When the battle ended, a piece of cloth fell from the instructor's waist. Boy, how did you do it? The instructor stared at Wang Chong with an incomparably awful expression. His temperament had always been the calm and collected type, but when Wang Chong cut off a piece of cloth soap from his waist, he could no longer maintain his composure. Instinct. Wang Chong smiled and spat out 2 words. He knew what the other party wanted to say. 10-directional thunderbolt fingers actually had a flaw. To be precise, it was because this unique skill was too difficult to practice. Its meridians were like a net that covered the entire body. Therefore, before reaching the great perfection, this unique skill would have a flaw. In the first exchange of blows, Wang Chong had already found out that the instructor's 10-directional thunderbolt fingers had a flaw. His strength chi had yet to be trained to the meridians at the right back of his waist, and the upper and lower meridians had yet to be completely opened up. Under normal circumstances, this kind of flaw was not a problem at all. However, as long as he followed a certain order and guided the yuan qi in his body according to a specific meridian and sequence, in the end, it would cause the yuan qi to stagnate at the right back of his waist. With the lack of yuan qi, a huge flaw would appear in his fist technique. However, this kind of thing was too shocking. Therefore, Wang Chong was not prepared to say it out loud. Instinct? The instructor seemed to be deep in thought. His furrowed eyebrows slowly relaxed as he accepted the explanation. In the world of martial arts, there were indeed some people who were talented and possessed extraordinary intuition. They were able to instantly find the flaws in their opponent's moves. If Wang Chong possessed such talent, it was no wonder what happened just now. To be able to cut off a piece of my robe with your intuition, you are indeed powerful. No matter what, you have passed this test. Thank you, instructor. Wang Chong was overjoyed and quickly bowed. You can wait at the side first. When it's time, I will bring you to familiarize yourself with the Kunwa training camp. In the future, I won't bring you too many people. You will have to familiarize yourselves with it, the instructor said. Wang Chong acknowledged and bowed before retreating. He felt much more relaxed now. After passing the test under this examiner, Wang Chong's biggest mission in the Kunwa training camp was completed. Gongzi, this person is too strong. I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to pass. When Wang Chong returned, Zhao Jingdian said with a frown. He could clearly see that even Wang Chong had a hard time winning. It would be even more difficult for him to pass. Don't be anxious. Wang Chong pondered for a moment before chuckling. Different people have different ways of passing the test. You won't be able to imitate my method. However, there might be other ways. Besides, didn't you notice? From the start to the end, this person has been suppressing his strength, never surpassing origin energy realm. This, Zhao Jingdian fell into deep thought. This person is at least a true martial realm expert. If he were to use his full strength, you can't possibly think that we would stand a chance, right? The so-called 3 chances were actually just a chance for us to pass. Otherwise, if he really doesn't want us to pass and attacks us, how can we pass? Wang Chong said. I understand. Zhao Jingdian immediately understood. This test was definitely difficult. At the very least, it wouldn't be easy to pass. However, it wasn't impossible. It just required some effort. Listen to me. Wang Chong pulled Zhao Jingdian over and whispered in his ear. Then he patted his shoulders. This is all I can tell you. You'll have to rely on yourself for the rest. It wasn't easy to pass the test. Even though the current Zhao Jingdian wasn't the same Zhao Jingdian from his previous life, some things wouldn't change. His words might not be of much use to others, but Wang Chong believed that Zhao Jingdian would understand the meaning behind it. Gongzi, I understand. Zhao Jingdian nodded. Walking down the mountain, Zhao Jingdian didn't rush to challenge the other party. Instead, he stood at the outer circle of the test and stroked his chin with a contemplative look in his eyes. Instructor, I am Zhao Jingdian. I would like to give it a try. Zhao Jingdian walked over and bowed respectfully. Hee, what do you have to wave at me? Come at me. The instructor waved his hands, not minding Zhao Jingdian's actions. Even though Zhao Jingdian was a man of few words and appeared to be slow on the outside, he wasn't weak. Just like Wang Chong, he was an Origin Energy Tier 7 expert. In Duke Jiao's lineage, the only one who could surpass him was probably Yi Yinping. It was precisely because Zhao Jingdian's cultivation wasn't weak that Wang Chong dared to allow him to give it a try. Boom! A cloud of dust flew up. Zhao Jingdian's fighting style was different from Wang Chong's. His fighting style was based on brute force, charging straight at the opponent without compromising on flexibility and flexibility. In this aspect, Zhao Jingdian's aptitude was top-notch. At the very least, he wasn't too far off from Wang Chong's. Boom, boom, boom. The two figures clashed with one another, and a few breaths later, a figure flew out from the dust like a broken kite. It was Zhao Jingdian. Do you still want to try? The instructor said with a faint smile. He had one hand behind his back and the other outstretched. His every movement had the bearing of an expert. Again! Zhao Jingdian wiped the blood from the corner of his lips and charged forward once more. This time, Zhao Jingdian's fighting style was clearly different from before. It was less brute force and more agile. However, he still couldn't escape the fate of being defeated. Boom! When Zhao Jingdian was sent flying once more, Wang Chong finally frowned. There were only 3 chances in the test, and Zhao Jingdian had already failed twice. If he were to fail once more, he wouldn't have another chance. Not only did I fail to help him, I might even be harming him instead, Wang Chong thought. He could sense that the instructor's strength was clearly higher than when he fought with him previously. It was clear that he was targeting Zhao Jingdian. The duo had been watching the battle by the side for a long time now, and their every action couldn't escape his eyes. This person was intending to give Zhao Jingdian a show of strength, determined not to let him pass. Zhao Jingdian, trample the enemy camp. Wang Chong suddenly rushed down the mountain. Hearing Wang Chong's words, Zhao Jingdian's body jolted. He abruptly turned around and stared at Wang Chong in disbelief, as though Wang Chong had just said something incredible. What is it? The instructor's eyebrows shot up as he glanced at Wang Chong in astonishment. Boom! At this moment, a brilliant light flashed, and Zhao Jingdian's origin energy burst forth. As though a ferocious tiger, he pounced forward. It was the same move and the same fighting style, but in the instructor's eyes, this familiar move seemed a little different. Boom! Just as Zhao Jingdian was about to be defeated once more, an abrupt change occurred. Zhao Jingdian's body jolted, and his aura surged. His speed surged, and in an instant he split into two, then into three, leaving behind 3 afterimages on the spot. With a loud boom, he evaded the instructor's punches and headed straight for the latter's chest. Boom! A pair of steel fists flew forward and struck Zhao Jingdian's chest, stopping him from going all out. But at the same time, a pair of feet struck deeply into the instructor's chest. Boom! Zhao Jingdian crashed heavily onto the ground, and a mouthful of blood spurted from his mouth. On the other hand, the instructor was still in his final attack stance. Glancing at the 2 footprints on his chest, a bizarre expression appeared on his face. You've won. The instructor finally spoke. Even though Zhao Jingdian's kick was nothing more than an itch to him, it didn't hurt him at all. Even so, he still lost in this move. He didn't expect Zhao Jingdian to use such a bizarre move to evade his defense and use a mutually destructive fighting style. Even though it was cheating, Zhao Jingdian had indeed left 2 footprints on his chest. Going by the rules, it was his loss. This is the method you taught him? The instructor looked at the approaching Wang Chong and asked helplessly. Yes. Wang Chong didn't deny it. Walking over, he passed a recovery pill to Zhao Jingdian. This was what he bought from Liu Zhizhang. Chapter 196. Let's go. I'll help you to the side to rest. Wang Chong helped Zhao Jingdian to the side. After consuming a pill and resting for a moment, Zhao Jingdian's complexion looked much better than before. Gongzi, how did you know that I'm practicing horse trampling on the barracks? Seeing that there was no one around and that he was a distance away from the instructor, Zhao Jingdian couldn't help but ask. Horse trampling on the barracks was an ultimate technique of the Zhao clan. In a short period of time, one's speed would increase exponentially, allowing him to split into 3 phantoms, allowing him to easily breach the other party's defense. While the other party's attention was focused on him, the crux of horse trampling on the barracks lay in his feet. All of his strength was gathered on his feet. That instructor fell for Zhao Jingdian's trick by a single move, and the latter kicked him in the chest. However, although this move was unique and could be used to break through the defense of powerful opponents, and it could easily display its miraculous effects when the opponent was unprepared, the difficulty of cultivating it also increased exponentially. There were very few people from the Zhao clan who succeeded in cultivating it. Zhao Jingdian had been secretly practicing horse trampling on the barracks, and even his grandfather wasn't aware of this. However, Zhao Jingdian hadn't fully mastered horse trampling on the barracks, so he had never thought of using it in a real battle. Most of the blood that he spat out was due to the backlash of his internal energy. My grandfather has mentioned the Zhao clan's horse trampling on the barracks to me before. I'm guessing that since you're already at Origin Energy Tier 7, you should have started practicing it. Wang Chong said. So it's Duke Jiao? Zhao Jingdian was taken aback for a moment before realization dawned on him. As long as Duke Jiao was involved in any matter, it wouldn't be surprising. He might be able to hide the fact that he was practicing horse trampling on the barracks from others, but he might not be able to hide it from Duke Jiao. Seeing Zhao Jingdian's expression, Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle inside. There was no need for him to ask his grandfather about Zhao Jingdian's matter. The two of them had battled for their entire lives, and he couldn't be more familiar with the other party's martial arts. He could tell with a single glance whether Zhao Jingdian had cultivated horse trampling on the barracks or not. There's a reason why I insisted that you join him. Although the people who graduate from the training camp are all elites in the future, it's not difficult for them to achieve meteoric success. But this person is different. In the future, when we go out, we will immediately be promoted to the rank of lieutenant and can directly lead troops into battle. We will have fewer years to struggle than others. You'll know that this mouthful of blood was worth it in the future. Ah! Zhao Jingdian raised his head in shock. Wang Chong nodded and didn't say anything. Those who learned the art of commanding were different from others. Those who graduated from this training camp, including those from Shunwei and Longwei, might start off as a corporal or a sergeant. However, it was different for those who learned the art of commanding. The moment they left the academy, they were at the rank of lieutenant. Their starting point was completely different from others. This was also the reason why Wang Chong insisted on being under his name. In his previous life, he spent most of his time in obscurity. It was only toward the end of his life that he caught the eye of the elders and was promoted to the position of the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains. However, he had already missed out on too many things back then. Thus, in this life, Wang Chong didn't want to repeat the same mistake. That was why he wanted to join that instructor. Lieutenant was a good starting point. Under normal circumstances, it would take at least 1 to 2 years for others to rise from an ordinary infantryman to a lieutenant. But to Wang Chong, he didn't lack anything other than time. The rank of a lieutenant could save him a lot of time. The examination will be over soon. You should rest here first. I'll go out for a walk. Wang Chong bade farewell to Zhao Jingdian before heading down the mountain. In Wang Chong's eyes, this batch of Kunwa training camp was a boundless treasure trove. There were too many future great generals here. If he operated it well and borrowed their strength, he might be able to change the future Tang dynasty. The future Grand Marshal of the Central Plains and a future great general. This was a force that no one could ignore. It was enough to change many things. Wang Chong quickly disappeared into the crowd. At the same time, a few figures stood out from the crowd. Let's go and give it a try. Among the crowd, Wang Chong wasn't the only one who was interested in joining the instructor's faction. Wang Chong had only observed for an hour, but there were others who had been observing for several hours. It was impossible for a student to defeat an instructor. Everyone thought that it was hopeless. However, the battle between Wang Chong and Zhao Jingdian had shown them too much. Wang Chong didn't know about the changes on the mountain. At this moment he was focused on other things. The future had already changed, and the current Kunwa training camp was vastly different from what he remembered it to be. At the very least, there weren't so many Saiyans who joined this place back then. Because of him, a lot of things had changed. However, the only fortunate thing was that correspondingly, the number of people recruited by Kunwa training camp had increased by a lot. This also meant that his influence on the future had become negligible. Those great generals of the Tang dynasty who were supposed to appear here would still appear here in the end. This was the most gratifying thing. On the majestic mountain, the crowd was surging. Everyone was looking for the instructor and worrying about the test. However, Wang Chong's attention was on the crowd. His eyes constantly scanned through them. Suddenly, a figure walking around in the crowd attracted Wang Chong's attention. This person had a large bow on his back. He was walking around a few imperial guards, as if he didn't know what to do. It's him? Wang Chong suddenly laughed in his heart. Looking at the symbolic large bow, Wang Chong vaguely thought of a person. It was said that in Kunwa training camp, there was a newcomer. Because the place he came from was very remote and it was his first time entering the capital, he couldn't tell the difference between the imperial guards on the mountain and the instructors at all. As a result, he spent a lot of time walking around those imperial guards, trying to find them to take the test. Those imperial guards had already told him that they were not instructors and that the instructors were on the mountain. In the end, this person was just an imperial guard at the bottom of the mountain. When he was switched to the imperial guard at a slightly higher place on the mountain, he still walked around those imperial guards. This matter was later spread as a joke in Kunwa training camp and made a lot of jokes. However, although he seemed to be muddle-headed, the strength of this person was completely inversely proportional to the jokes he made. The large bow on his back was the best proof. It was said that this person could accurately shoot an apple on a tree at the top of the mountain from several miles away with one arrow. Furthermore, the archers that he led were the sharpest troops on the battlefield. Seeing that the man was still buzzing around like a housefly, Wang Chong faintly smiled and quickly walked away. "Brother, may I know how I should address you?" Wang Chong walked over and asked. Upon walking closer, he realized that the person was around 16 to 17 years old, and he was dressed in a beast skin robe, looking just like a hunter in the mountains. I am Chen Burang. It was the governor of Huainan who recommended me here." The young hunter had an uneasy expression on his face. "It's really him?" Wang Chong was astonished. Without a doubt, it should be him. Even his name matched. However, Wang Chong didn't expect the other party to be a hunter. It was no wonder why he didn't bother asking around despite so many people passing by. It was probably because he rarely interacted with others. "Are you looking for the instructor who is taking the test?" Wang Chong asked. "Wise, but I can't find him. Is the test over?" By the end, Chen Burang was on the verge of tears. Hearing those words, Wang Chong almost burst out laughing. This person was able to pass the previous tests, so logically speaking, he should know a little. It seemed like this was his first time traveling and he had no experience in this aspect. "Hee, don't worry. The test is still far from over. How about this? Since you are taking the test, let me bring you there." Wang Chong said. That's great." The young man was overjoyed. He looked at Wang Chong with gratitude. Ever since he entered the Kanwa training camp, this was the first time someone had taken the initiative to talk to him. Wang Chong didn't say much and led him to the top of the mountain. "The people you asked were all from the Imperial Army. The real instructors are at the top of the mountain. Although their temperaments are similar, they are different. Furthermore, the clothes they wear are different. All the Imperial Army members are wearing armor. Although the instructors are also wearing armor, you can tell that they are different." The look of realization on Chen Burang's face was hilarious. Walking at the back, Chen Burang seemed to be curious about everything. Wang Chong finally believed that it was inevitable for him to make a fool out of himself. "You are practicing archery, right? If you wish to learn archery, I can recommend an instructor. He specializes in teaching archery." Wang Chong said. "All right." Chen Burang agreed without hesitation. He was completely obedient to Wang Chong, appearing to be extremely trustworthy. After interacting with him for a while, Wang Chong had a good impression of him. This person had just come out of the mountains, and his body still maintained a simple and natural aura like that of the wilderness. Such an aura naturally made people feel close to him. "Right, I still don't know how I should address you?" Chen Burang suddenly recalled something and patted his head. "My name is Wang Chong." Chen Burang abruptly stopped in his tracks. He stared at Wang Chong with widened eyes. "Could it be that you are?" Staring at Wang Chong, Chen Burang stammered, unable to form a complete sentence. Even though he was a hunter in the mountains, he had heard of the name Wang Chong before. He didn't expect that the person who guided him and helped him would be Wang Chong. Wang Chong smiled and nodded. The benefits that the regional commander's incident had brought him were far greater than he had imagined. This was something that Wang Chong couldn't have imagined. This also made it easier for Wang Chong to carry out his plan. "Kanwa training camp is only this big. If you have time, come and look for me. Maybe we can exchange some pointers." Wang Chong sent an invitation to Chen Burang. No problem, no problem. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.